Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Dan Markel. Dan Markel was born in Toronto, Canada. In 1970, he was a highly intelligent and successful individual. Dan attended several universities, including those in Jerusalem and Cambridge, before earning his law degree from Harvard in 2001. After spending a few years working as a clerk in a law firm, he received an exciting opportunity in 2005. Florida State University was seeking someone with his qualifications to join their law school, and he accepted the position. Dan was well suited for this role because he enjoyed teaching and had a passion for criminal law. While teaching various legal subjects at the university, he also dedicated time to writing numerous papers on criminal law. Dan's life took a positive turn when he met his new partner, Wendy Adelson, on a dating site for single Jews. At the time, Dan was 33 and Wendy was 26, and they seemed to get along very well. Both shared a passion for criminal law and later taught at the University of Florida. Their relationship progressed rapidly, leading them to get engaged and married on February 26, 2006. They enjoyed a fulfilling life together, each having their dream jobs and good incomes. In 2009, they welcomed their first son, followed by a second in 2010. Everything seemed wonderful until 2012, when their relationship deteriorated, resulting in their separation before their divorce. The couple kept the reason for their separation a secret, leaving others unsure why their marriage ended so abruptly. By 2013, they were divorced. One day, Dan returned from a business trip to find that most of the furniture in the house was gone. Wendy had taken most of their belongings with her, leaving only a few items behind. The process was quick. It only took her a day and a night to move. Her quick action to clean up the house showed how bad their marriage had become. Wendy left divorce papers on the mattress. Wendy seemed determined to hurt Dan as much as possible. She changed the children's last names to hers, and even changed one of her sons' names. Wendy tried to erase everything related to Dan from her life and the lives of her children. Trying to cut a father out of her children's lives could be considered cruel and vengeful. In 2014, Dan and Wendy were living separate lives. Wendy had started writing and attempted to publish a law book on human trafficking. However, her approach was different from Dan's, and the book was a complete failure, receiving harsh criticism. As a result, few people were interested in buying it. On July 18, 2014, Dan went to Wendy's house to pick up their kids for preschool, which was part of his usual routine. He also went to the gym and stopped by a few stores. But nothing out of the ordinary happened that day, until he returned home around 11:00 a.m. When he arrived, he saw that someone was waiting for him. Although the details of his phone conversation at that moment were not public, it was reported that the person waiting for Dan was there to ambush him. Before Dan could open the car door to get into the house, a bullet wounded him. A neighbor heard the explosion and ran out. Dan was still in the driver's seat. Surrounded by broken glass, the neighbor quickly called 911. The neighbor later reported seeing a car pull into the driveway just before the gunshots. He saw Dan in the front seat, in critical condition, still alive, but unable to call the police. When the ambulance was called, the police tried to get information from a neighbor. The only thing the neighbor saw was a silver Toyota Prius leaving the area right after the gunshots. The ambulance then arrived, and Dan was taken to the nearest hospital. Unfortunately, his injuries were quite serious, and Dan passed away in the intensive care unit 14 hours later. Dan, a man who seemed to have no enemies and was loved by everyone, was shot dead in his own driveway. A memorial service was later held for Dan Markel, attended by friends, family, and students who wanted to express their love, respect, and admiration for the professor. The main task of the police was to find a silver Toyota Prius that could be linked to the case, provided by a neighbor. At the same time, the police also began questioning his ex-wife, Wendy Adelson. She was brought in for questioning on the same day Dan was killed. As Wendy entered the interrogation room, she received a voice message from a friend who was a real estate staff. The message stated that there had been a shooting near where Wendy used to live and that she hoped Wendy was okay. The voice message continued, explaining that there had been a shooting at Wendy's old home and that her ex-husband was seriously injured and would likely not survive. Wendy was very upset and began to cry. She said that she had emailed Dan that morning and that everything seemed fine. She then asked the police what had happened to Dan. The police responded that they could not share any information until they had confirmed her whereabouts at the time of the shooting to rule her out as a suspect. Wendy told the police that she had left her home around noon to run an errand. When the police asked her if she knew anyone who would want to hurt Dan, she burst into tears and struggled to answer. She finally said that Dan was sometimes mean to people, but she couldn't believe anyone would be cruel enough to hurt him. The police then asked if Dan owed anyone money, and with tears in her eyes, Wendy revealed that Dan owed her child support. She seemed genuinely shocked by the situation. Police ruled out robbery as a motive because the killer did not try to break into a home or car or search pockets for valuables like a wallet, house keys, or credit cards. At the time, the only motive they could consider was revenge. But what could he have done to make someone pull out a gun and shoot someone in broad daylight like that? To gather more information, the police appealed to the public for help. Police confirmed that the murder was intentional and offered a reward for tips leading to an arrest and conviction. The reward started at $10 and increased to $25 over time. Additionally, an anonymous donor contributed a separate $100 reward. Police expanded their search for suspects by interviewing students, friends, and family members. However, their efforts were unsuccessful. As everyone described Dan as a kind person, no one could explain why anyone would want to harm him. 12 months after the crime, there have been no new leads. Police held a press conference and released a photo of a silver Toyota Prius. They did not explain why they waited a year to share this information. Further appeals from the public have yielded no results, and nearly 2 years have passed without any new leads in the case. The perpetrator has had enough time to destroy all evidence, making it difficult for police to solve the case. This continued until May 26, 2016, nearly 2 years after Dan's murder. A Leon County judge issued an arrest warrant for Sigfredo Garcia, a 30-year-old man charged with first-degree murder in the death of Dan Markel. Tallahassee police did not release details at the time of the arrest. However, a few days later, police learned that Sigfredo had an accomplice, Luis Rivera, also 30, of Miami, who was seen driving a rented silver Toyota Prius between motels on July 16-17. Police collected various pieces of evidence about the couple, including cell phone records, electronic toll collection data, and surveillance footage from nearby buildings and buses. They believed that on July 18, Dan was being monitored as he went about his daily routine, which included trips to kindergarten, the gym, and shops before heading home. However, one question has been raised: why would these two men kill someone they apparently never met? Police suspect that this may have been a contract killing, implying that Sigfredo and Luis were paid to kill Dan. If this was indeed a contract killing, then who hired them? Sigfredo and Luis realized that no matter how much money they were paid, their crimes could not be hidden. They then began to confess to the police that they were hired by Charlie and Donna Adelson. Charlie was Wendy's brother, and Donna was her mother. On the surface, they seemed to be respectable people. Running a pathology clinic together, Charlie worked as a dentist, while Donna focused on patient care. However, This information was not enough to convict Charlie and Donna. The police knew that the suspect could name anyone to save himself to find answers. The police turned to a woman named Catherine Magbanua. She was related to Charlie Adelson and was also the ex-wife of Sigfredo Garcia. Phone records show that Catherine received a call from Luis shortly after Dan's murder. Likely to inform her that the mission was complete, Catherine was the sole intermediary between Luis, Sigfredo, and Charlie, as they had never met. Over a 12-month period, Catherine sent tens of thousands of dollars, starting a few months before Dan's murder and continuing for months afterward. Most of the payments were made by check, a risky option for Donna's family because checks were easily traceable due to the signature requirement. Each check sent bore Donna Adelson's signature. After investigation, it was discovered that Donna had a strong dislike for her former son-in-law, especially in the months leading up to the murder. She had sent a series of angry emails, filled with curses and insults, aimed at Dan. In these emails, she used every vulgar word she could think of to describe him, while the entire Adelson family lived in Miami. Wendy lived in Tallahassee, near Dan's home. She wanted to move to Miami to be closer to her family, but Dan was against it. He did not engage in any violence or threats against Wendy, which allowed him to go to court and get a judgment preventing her from moving away with the children. During their divorce, they agreed to split custody of the children. In a 50-50 agreement, however, there was another reason Donna hated him. Dan went to court shortly before he was murdered to file a motion to prevent Donna from spending private time with her children without supervision, while serving time for other crimes. Luis asked to speak to the police. He said he had information that could lead to a deal. The police agreed to meet with him. During questioning, Luis shared his story. He said he did not know Dan was going to be killed until he was in the car with Sigfredo. Previously, Sigfredo had told him it was just a simple robbery. After getting in the car and learning about Dan Markel's murder, Luis was upset and insisted that he did not want to kill a man he had never met, especially since the man had 2 children. Louis also mentioned a woman named Catherine, saying that she was behind the plan. Up to this point, Charlie and Donna continue to deny any involvement in the murder. Although the police have checks signed by Donna, however, these checks do not necessarily indicate that she intended to kill Dan. They could have been written for a variety of reasons. At this point, the FBI gets involved and formulates a plan. Charlie begins to receive unusual phone calls from a man identifying himself as Sandy. Sandy questions why Luis isn't being processed in prison. Although Charlie is frightened by the calls, he tries to remain calm and does not reveal anything incriminating. In reality, Sandy is an undercover cop. The FBI has also hacked into Charlie's cell phone in hopes of gathering evidence against him. In July 2016, a Leon County grand jury indicted Sigfredo and Luis for murder. Catherine was later arrested. Luis's charges were reduced to second-degree murder. Luis Rivera was sentenced to 19 years in prison. Catherine and Charlie's trials were held together on October 19, 2016. As they were facing the same charges, the defense argued that Charlie Adelson was the mastermind behind the murder plot, claiming he had promised to split $100 between the 3 of them so that Wendy could gain full custody without further interference from Dan. During the trial, the prosecution presented a key witness, Jeffrey Lucas, Wendy Adelson's ex-boyfriend. He testified that Wendy had told him that her brother, Charlie, had mentioned the idea of hiring a hitman to kill Dan several times. On July 13, Wendy asked Jeffrey if she could share something confidential. She revealed that Charlie had explored various options for dealing with her problems and had discussed hiring a hitman to eliminate Dan. At an estimated cost of $50, Sigfredo claimed in court that Luis fired the fatal shot. However, This defense was not enough to save Sigfredo from first-degree murder. Sigfredo Garcia was convicted and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, plus an additional 30 years for his involvement in the conspiracy. Sigfredo said he would appeal the sentence. Catherine denied any involvement in the murder during her trial alongside Sigfredo. Her charges were reduced to second-degree murder, but the jury could not reach a verdict. The judge declared a mistrial. This retrial began on May 16, 2022, and lasted 11 days. The jury was more decisive this time. And on May 27, 2022, Catherine Magbanua was found guilty of first-degree murder and incitement to commit murder. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, plus an additional 30 years for incitement and another 30 years for conspiracy. Although the three main perpetrators were thought to be incarcerated, a new arrest occurred on April 21, 2022. Police arrested Charlie Adelson at his home. He was charged with first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and solicitation to commit murder. Following this, police discovered audio recordings of conversations between Catherine and Charlie discussing their conspiracy on the day of Charlie Adelson's trial. He was sentenced to life in prison plus 30 years for each of the conspiracy and solicitation charges. As this case comes to a close, many questions remain unanswered. The defendant's testimony suggests that Dan Markel needed to be killed in order for Wendy to gain full custody of their children. This raises the possibility that Wendy may have had a larger role in this case than she admitted. However, it is important to note that there is no evidence to support this claim, and no charges have been filed against Wendy Donna Adelson, who signed several checks worth thousands of dollars, has a history of hostility toward Dan, was arrested at Miami International Airport on a warrant from Leon County. Donna was charged with first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and solicitation to commit murder. Donna's trial is expected to begin in late 2024 or early 2025. Dan Markel's friends and colleagues still remember him and his great contributions to legal issues. Dan devoted his life to his children, which is why he was in court so often. Because he needed to make sure they would never be taken from him, his life ended tragically at the age of just 40. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Sarah Johnson. In the quiet town of Bellevue, Idaho, a typical Tuesday morning on September 2, 2003, turned into a chaotic scene. At 6:20 a.m., residents were jolted by the sound of gunshots, followed by the wailing of sirens as sheriff's deputies from Blake County rushed to the Johnson residence. Inside the house, officers found a gruesome scene. Diane Johnson had been shot once in the head and was found in bed, while her husband Alan Johnson lay dead on the floor, having been shot once in the chest. A 16-year-old girl named Sarah was left shaken but unharmed after a traumatic event. As detectives investigated the scene, they discovered surprising secrets that ultimately led to a stunning discovery. But who had Sarah's parents, Diane and Alan, wronged, and what series of events led to their heartbreaking deaths? A frantic 911 call was made after a neighbor reported a horrific crime. The caller stated that a 16-year-old girl, Sarah Johnson, had arrived at her doorstep, frantically screaming that her parents had been shot. The caller reported hearing 2 gunshots. According to the neighbor, Kim, Sarah had run to her house in a state of panic, claiming that her parents, Diane and Alan Johnson, had been murdered. The police and emergency responders were immediately dispatched to the scene. Upon arrival, law enforcement officials entered the house and were met with a disturbing scene. They found Diane, 52, in bed with a fatal gunshot wound to her head. It appeared that she had been killed while she was asleep. The walls and ceiling near the headboard were splattered with blood, and a fragment of her skull was found on the floor. Alan's body was found on the floor beside Diane's side of the bed. He was wearing only a towel, and a large pool of blood had formed around him. Initially, police thought they had a clear-cut murder-suicide case. However, as they took a closer look at the crime scene, their theory quickly unraveled. At the scene, investigators noticed the sound of running water and followed the trail of blood to the adjacent bathroom. The shower was still on. Once they turned off the water, they observed blood splatter on the walls and a single bullet hole in the shower wall. The officers then expanded their search of the house for more evidence. In the bedroom where Diane's body was found, investigators discovered what they believed to be the murder weapon, a .264 caliber Winston rifle, on the floor. At the foot of the bed, 2 kitchen knives were also discovered. Another knife was found on the bed of the Johnson's son, Matt. The placement of these knives baffled investigators. The presence of the knives at the scene raised many questions. It was unclear why they were placed in such a deliberate manner, and what significance they held. A further peculiarity was the lack of forced entry, which suggested that the killer may have been someone familiar with the family's habits. Specifically, the fact that the Johnsons rarely locked their doors, a detail known only to those close to them, seemed particularly relevant. Additionally, the house showed no signs of having been ransacked, which contradicted the possibility of a robbery gone wrong. Sarah told police she was asleep when she heard a gunshot. She immediately got up and ran to her parents' bedroom to call out for her mother. That's when she heard a second gunshot. Fearful for her safety, Sarah rushed to her neighbor's house for help. She didn't see the person who fired the shots. Her neighbor, Kim Richards, backed up Sarah's account and was the one who called 911. On the property was a separate guest house that belonged to a family friend, 45-year-old Mel Spiegel. As investigators entered the house, they discovered a crucial piece of evidence on the bed, the scope from the rifle found at the crime scene. However, Mel Spiegel was unexpectedly absent. His sudden disappearance raised suspicions, making him a person of interest for the investigators. Sergeant Walt Femling ordered the property sealed off and instructed officers to stop the waste disposal truck from collecting trash. A critical piece of evidence was nearly collected and taken away, but a deputy intervened just in time, stopping the truck just a house away. The theory was that Mel had a confrontation with Alan and Diane, which escalated into a violent argument, resulting in their deaths. As investigators explored this possibility, forensic teams searched the trash cans and found additional evidence. Inside a bundled-up pink bathrobe, they discovered a latex glove, a single brown leather glove matching the one found in the Johnsons' bedroom, and ammunition for a .25 caliber gun. The evidence was carefully tagged and sent for DNA testing. As investigators pieced together their own scenario, it became clear that the killer likely had prior knowledge of the Johnsons' unlocked doors and the trash collection schedule. It was possible that the killer disposed of the evidence in the trash before fleeing the scene after the double homicide. Mel was located in Boise, Idaho. He voluntarily met with investigators at the Boise police station. The investigators inquired about Mel's activities earlier that day, and Mel stated that he had spent the weekend with his family. He was planning to return to Bell in a week. To verify Mel's alibi, investigators contacted his family members, who confirmed that he was indeed with them. During the conversation, Mel discussed his relationship with Alan and Diane, explaining that he had rented the guest house from they for years. Mel described his relationship with they as close and very good. When questioned about the rifle used in the murders, Mel acknowledged that it was his, but claimed it had been stored in his closet before he left for Boise over the weekend. Investigators then inquired about potential enemies of they. Mel shared that Alan and Diane had been concerned about their daughter Sarah's relationship with 19-year-old Bruno Santos, who was allegedly living in the country without proper documentation and selling drugs. Mel specifically mentioned Bruno Santos as someone investigators should look into. Mel encouraged investigators to talk to other family members, leading them to reconstruct the Johnson family's history. Here's what they discovered. Alan and Diane Johnson's relationship began in the early 1980s. At the time, Diane was a single mother to a toddler son, Matt, from a previous relationship. They got married in 1983, and Alan adopted Matt as his own son. The family settled in a beautiful home in the quiet city of Bell, Idaho. In 1987, they welcomed a new addition, a daughter named Sarah Johnson, born on January 25. Their children, Matt and Sarah, were both doing well in their studies. Matt, who was 22 at the time, was a university student at the University of Idaho in Moscow. Sarah was not only excelling in her schoolwork, but was also an accomplished athlete on her school's volleyball team and received adoring attention from her father Alan. The investigators had been ruling out potential suspects and were about to reveal underlying family conflicts that had been escalating over the past few months. With Mel cleared as a suspect, the Johnson family was known to be happy and loving, but things changed when Sarah started dating Bruno Santos. Investigators interviewed the family members, including Matt, the son who had returned home from university, and Diane's sister and brother-in-law, Linda and Jim Fave. All of them described the family life as happy and normal until Sarah and Bruno became a couple. According to Matt, Linda, and Jim, Sarah's relationship with Bruno caused significant tension in the family, which escalated over the months leading up to the murder. Sarah resisted her parents' rules, particularly when they forbade her from seeing Bruno again. Despite this, she continued to defy them. Jim revealed to investigators that Bruno had a potential motive to murder Diane and Alan. A few days before the murders, Alan and Diane had discovered that Sarah had lied about sleeping over at a friend's house. In reality, she had spent the night with Bruno. Alan informed Jim about the situation and asked him to join them in confronting Bruno. Jim informed investigators that Alan was enraged and threatened to report Bruno to the police for assaulting underage Sarah. The three then left together. A charge of this severity could result in Bruno's deportation. After hearing Jim's account, investigators suspected that Bruno had a strong motive to harm the Johnsons. They decided it was time to speak with Bruno. Santos County Police were familiar with Bruno Santos, a high school dropout with a history of minor drug-related offenses. When questioned, Bruno became confrontational and arrogant, making it challenging for investigators to deal with him. During questioning, Bruno claimed he had recently proposed to Sarah, and she had accepted. It's thought that Bruno made this claim to demonstrate his love for Sarah and prove that he wouldn't have done anything to harm their relationship. When investigators inquired about his whereabouts on the morning of the murders, Bruno said he was sleeping on the couch at his residence. He suggested that officers contact his mother, who confirmed that she was also at home with him at the time. Despite this, his alibi was not considered particularly solid. When investigators questioned Bruno about the murders of Alan and Diane Johnson, Bruno expressed his hatred for Alan and Diane Johnson. Bruno was initially the prime suspect because of his obvious motive. He was angry with the Johnson family, especially Diane, Sarah's mother. By killing the Johnsons, Bruno hoped to be with Sarah. The investigation into Bruno's involvement in the Alan and Diane Johnson murders took a significant step forward when a search warrant was executed at his home. As a result, the clothing and shoes he wore on the day of the incident were seized for forensic testing. Additionally, Bruno's fingerprints were taken to compare with any prints found at the crime scene. A DNA sample was also collected from Bruno at the hospital, along with hair clippings and scrapings from his hands. Based on the evidence gathered, Bruno was identified as the primary suspect in the murders of Alan and Diane Johnson. Despite thorough investigation, forensic experts found no evidence linking Bruno to the crime scene. Neither Diane's nor Alan's blood was found on Bruno's clothes or shoes, and no DNA, hair, or fingerprints from the accused were detected near the bodies. Additionally, no physical evidence placed Bruno in their room. The gloves and bathrobe tested negative for any incriminating evidence. The crime scene yielded no DNA or fingerprints from Bruno, and no blood or DNA from the victims was found on his clothing. Bruno was eventually ruled out as a suspect in the case. As investigators took a closer look, their attention turned to someone else. They began to question Sarah's family and friends more thoroughly about her home life and personal relationships. This led to the discovery that Sarah had been prescribed antidepressants and that her relationship with her parents was strained. Her family members had initially dismissed her behavior as typical for a teenager, assuming she was going through a normal phase of rebellion and testing boundaries with her parents. Linda, Sarah's aunt, grew increasingly suspicious of her niece's behavior in the aftermath of her parents' deaths. She reported to investigators that Sarah was not exhibiting the typical signs of grieving and instead seemed more focused on returning to her normal routine with friends and school. Sarah showed little emotional response to the loss of her parents, which Linda found unusual and even alarming. Her reactions seemed remarkably detached and strange. This raised more questions, prompting investigators to speak with some of Sarah's friends to gather more insight into her behavior following the tragic events. It was clear to everyone that Sarah did not show enough concern about the deaths of Alan and Diane Johnson. In fact, she seemed more focused on her own appearance, particularly getting her nails painted. What struck investigators as unusual, however, was Sarah's reaction to Bruno's arrest. Instead of being angry, she appeared to be worried about him, which seemed odd given that he was suspected of killing her parents. This remark led investigators to consider Sarah as a potential suspect, the most worrying aspect being that Sarah could commit such a heinous crime. The Johnsons' home remained an active crime scene, with investigators now focusing on Sarah's room as a second key area of interest. A question had arisen about how the blood splatter had traveled such a distance. To address this, a gun expert was brought in to examine the splatter pattern more closely. After analyzing the trajectory from Alan and Diane's room to Sarah's, the expert determined that both bedroom doors were open at the time of the shooting. This conclusion was supported by the presence of blood deposits on the back edge of Sarah's door, where the hinges are located, suggesting that the door was open, allowing the projectile to enter her bedroom. This meant that both bedroom doors, as well as Sarah's door, were open and there was a hallway in between. During the investigation, plumbers were called to the scene to address a clogged toilet in one of the bathrooms. The clog was found to be caused by a shower cap. As a result, investigators decided to question Linda, Matt, and Mel Spiegel about some of the evidence they had discovered. Both Matt and Linda identified a pink bathrobe as belonging to Sarah. Mel Spiegel confirmed that Sarah had a key to the guest house. He also revealed that Sarah was aware of the gun stored in the closet. However, investigators faced a challenge in linking Sarah to the evidence. Eyewitnesses reported that Sarah did not have any visible blood on her when she ran to a neighbor's house for help on the morning of the murders. Forensic experts used luminol to test Sarah's clothes for blood splatter, but found none. Despite this, investigators obtained a warrant to seize and test the clothes Sarah was wearing that morning. Meanwhile, investigators asked Sarah to return for another interview to determine if her account had changed since they last spoke. They had noticed small inconsistencies in her previous statements. When questioned again, investigators found that Sarah's story had altered significantly. Specifically, they identified at least 5 changes to her explanations. In some instances, she claimed to have been asleep and was awoken by the sound of a gunshot, but her story varied across different interviews. When questioned about the door to her parents' room, Sarah struggled to recall whether it was open or closed at the time of the shooting. Despite Sarah's inconsistencies, investigators maintained a calm demeanor during questioning to avoid raising her suspicions. They were already aware that both bedroom doors were open, which was the only explanation for the blood splatter on Sarah's bedroom wall. As part of the investigation to clear her name, Sarah was asked to provide a DNA sample, hair samples, and hand scrapings, all of which were sent to the lab for testing. The pajama top and bottom she was wearing on the morning of the murders were also sent to the lab for examination by forensic specialist Rod Engard. Under a high-powered microscope, Engard found no blood on the front of the robe. However, on the back of the garment, he discovered patterns of high-velocity blood splatter. These stains were extremely small, some even smaller than a pencil mark, and were layered on top of each other, indicating a high-energy impact. He discovered blue cotton fibers and green paint specks on the inside of the robe that matched the shirt Sarah wore that morning. However, the most incriminating evidence was yet to come. Lab results confirmed that Sarah's DNA was found on the inner lining of the latex glove, and gun residue was detected on both pairs of the brown leather gloves. The robe, leather gloves, and latex gloves were sent to a lab in Chicago, Kahn and Associates, for further analysis. The lab found gunshot residue on all three items. The blood on the gloves and robe belonged to both Alan and Diane. This evidence was sufficient for investigators to arrest and charge Sarah with the double homicide of Alan and Diane Johnson on October 29, 2003. Sarah Johnson was arrested for the murders of her parents, Alan and Diane Johnson, and was held without bail at the Blake County Jail awaiting trial. The shocking crime made headlines across the country, captivating the nation's attention and sparking a media frenzy. To build a case against Sarah, investigators and prosecutors had to create a convincing argument that demonstrated her motivation and capability to commit such a horrific crime. Sarah's parents disapproved of her relationship with Bruno from the start. As a result, Sarah began sneaking around behind their backs and acting out in typical teenage fashion. However, the turning point came just a few days before the murders. A heated argument with her parents drove Sarah to desperation. She had lied about staying with a friend, when in reality she was with Bruno. Her father's threats to have Bruno charged with assault and deported to Mexico pushed Sarah to the edge. Investigators and prosecutors believed that this was the moment Sarah hatched a plan to eliminate her parents and start a new life with Bruno. On the morning of the murders, she went to the guest house to retrieve the rifle, setting the events in motion. Sarah carefully prepared herself to commit the crime by putting on latex gloves, leather gloves, and a shower cap to prevent blood from getting on her hair and clothes. She then went to her parents' room, where she shot her mother, Diane, in the head while she was asleep. When her father, Alan, got out of the shower and opened the bathroom door, Sarah shot him in the chest. After killing her parents, Sarah attempted to make it look like an intruder had committed the crime by placing knives in the bedrooms. She then gathered up the evidence and threw it away in the trash, hoping that the waste disposal company would collect it before investigators could find it. However, she made a critical mistake by not considering the evidence that would be found in her own room. Additionally, the shower cap she had worn became lodged in a plumbing system, leaving behind a crucial piece of evidence. The evidence against Sarah Johnson was overwhelming, and her trial began in February 2005, 2 years after her parents' murders. At 18 years old, Sarah stood accused of killing her parents. Her defense team maintained that Sarah was innocent and that an intruder had committed the crime. However, the prosecution was well prepared to present their case. They introduced physical evidence found at the crime scene and testimonies from family and friends that raised suspicions about Sarah's behavior. On the morning of the murders, there were 3 people in the Johnson household: Alan, Diane, and Sarah. 2 of them did not survive. The one person who did come out alive was Sarah Johnson, who was now sitting in the courtroom. The most damaging testimony came from Bruno Santos, who not only sought to clear his own name in the murder trial but also provided the jury with insight into Sarah's state of mind before the murders. Bruno testified that he and Sarah had planned to get married and that she had described a future where they would live together in a beautiful house, happy with just each other. He also revealed that Sarah frequently expressed her hatred for her father and even talked about shooting him. After 5 weeks of testimony, evidence, and explanations of the crime scene, the jury delivered its verdict on March 16, 2005. Sarah, 18, was convicted of 2 counts of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without parole at the Pocatello Women's Correctional Center in Idaho. Despite making multiple appeals to reduce her sentence, Sarah remains in custody as all her appeals have been denied. Following her sentencing, her family members have publicly expressed their feelings about Sarah and her actions. The murders of Alan and Diane have had a devastating impact on their family, with most members believing that Sarah is responsible and deserves her punishment. Sarah's brother, Matt, has stated that Sarah showed no remorse for killing their parents and believes that if given a second chance, she would try to avoid being caught again. At the sentencing hearing, Pat Dishman, Diane's mother, addressed Sarah directly. She told her granddaughter that despite everything, they still loved her. However, her actions had left a devastating impact on their entire family. "We'd been absolutely destroyed by the loss of your Alan and Diane, and it was even harder to come to terms with the fact that it was you who did it." Alan's sister Lynn expressed her concerns about Sarah's character, stating that she is spoiled and violent, and capable of committing murder if released from prison. Lynn urged the judge to consider keeping Sarah incarcerated permanently. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat, the case of Laura Wallin. Laura Wallin was born on February 10, 1986, to parents Mark and Gwen Wallin. She grew up in Olney, Maryland, alongside her older sister Jennifer, with whom she had a very close relationship. Laura's passion was in helping others, which led her to pursue a career as a social science teacher. The investigation into her disappearance began on September 5, 2017. It was led by Montgomery County Police Chief Tom Manger. He worked alongside Laura's family and friends, as well as her students. A group of more than 20 people, led by Saquon Maxwell, a former student of Laura's, came together to spread the word about Laura's disappearance by distributing flyers throughout the neighborhood and school district. Police officers searched Laura's neighborhood, asking residents questions and keeping a close eye on the area between Howard and Montgomery County. Laura's father, Mark, made a public plea for anyone with information to come forward and help find his daughter. He wanted Laura to know they were doing everything they could to find her and they weren't going to give up. Losing a child is one of the most difficult experiences a parent can face, and Mark wanted his daughter to know that they were working hard to bring her home safely. On the evening of September 7, 2017, an employee at the Jersey Gated Complex in Columbia, Maryland, found a new clue. While rummaging through a dumpster, he found Laura's license inside a cell phone. When police arrived, they also found Laura's vehicle parked at the complex. What puzzled them was that the complex was located just across the highway from Wild Lake High School, where Laura worked. This raised questions about why Laura would have parked her car there. Police took the evidence they collected to the lab for further testing. They also looked deeper into Laura's past and spoke to people close to her. To cover more ground, the investigation team divided into 2 groups. One group focused on tracking Laura's online activities, while the other group interviewed her family members and her boyfriend. To gather evidence, the police searched Laura's computer and cell phone. They also thoroughly searched her car for any clues that might point to her disappearance. In addition, they carefully reviewed her financial transactions and cell phone records. As part of their inquiry, the police also spoke with Laura's parents and sister about her disappearance. Laura's father, Mark, told them that the family had planned a weekend trip together, but Laura decided to stay behind to spend time with her boyfriend, Tyler. This was confirmed by her sister, Jennifer, who told police that Laura was expecting Tyler to propose to her during their time together. Police also obtained a text message conversation between Jennifer and Laura from the same weekend. Jennifer received messages from Laura stating that she and Tyler had plans for a countryside adventure on Saturday, September 2, 2017. Mark mentioned that Tyler had expressed his intention to marry Laura after learning of her pregnancy. However, on Monday morning, September 4, 2017, Laura sent Jennifer a concerning text message claiming the baby was not Tyler's, but rather her ex-boyfriend Antoine's. Jennifer found this suspicious, as Laura hadn't seen Antoine in over 2 years. She also noted that Laura had misspelled Antoine's name. When Jennifer tried to contact Laura, she received no response. Upon returning home on Monday evening, the family discovered that Laura was missing, leaving behind burning candles and her pet dog locked inside. The family suggested questioning Tyler, as he was the last person to see Laura. Tyler spoke with police and shared details of his weekend with Laura. He explained that he took her to Damascus, Maryland, to view a property he was interested in buying as a home for their future family. Laura seems excited about the idea of starting a family in the countryside. However, when they returned to Olney the following day, Sunday, September 3, 2017, the atmosphere had changed. According to Tyler, Laura was not as happy as she had been the day before. He revealed that they had an argument in Damascus, but he declined to elaborate on the disagreement. Tyler told police that when they returned to Laura's house, she asked him to return his set of keys. He agreed, not wanting to upset her further due to her pregnancy. They had planned to meet at the Columbia Mall on the morning of Monday, September 4, 2017, for breakfast and to discuss their issues, but Laura did not show up. When Tyler visited her house, there was no sign of her. Tyler initially told the police that he was unable to enter Laura's home because he didn't have a key. However, this statement was false. The neighbors reported seeing Tyler walking Laura's dog on Monday, September 4, at 2:30 p.m., which directly contradicted Tyler's claim. This raised a question for the police. If Tyler didn't have a key, how was he able to enter the home to take the dog for a walk? As police dug deeper, their suspicions about Tyler grew. They asked for and received permission to review his phone records. They also secretly placed a tracking device on his vehicle to monitor his movements. During this time, the police continued to search for Laura, fearing the worst but they hoping for the best and that she would return safely. The investigation uncovered some crucial information. A debit card transaction on September 2, 2017, revealed that Laura had made a purchase at a Safeway store. Surveillance footage confirmed that Tyler and Laura were together that evening. Analysis of their phone records showed that both their phones were in the same locations from that Saturday evening, but on Sunday, Laura's phone suddenly stopped moving. This finding, combined with the tracking device revealing Tyler's frequent visits to a field in Damascus, continues to imply Tyler is involved in Laura's disappearance. Tyler's phone records showed that he had texted a friend on Sunday evening, asking for a ride to help clean up a mess, but the friend declined. Further investigation revealed that both Tyler's and Laura's fingerprints were found on her vehicle, cell phone, and license, which were discovered in a dumpster in Columbia. This new evidence led police to bring Tyler in for additional questioning. Police asked Tyler about his involvement with Laura's cell phone and the presence of his fingerprints on her belongings. They also inquired about the cryptic message he had sent to his friend. In response, Tyler changed his story. He claimed that Laura was in trouble because she was pregnant by someone else, not him. He alleged that Laura had an affair with a student, which resulted in her pregnancy. Tyler's statement to the police was startling. He explained that he had taken Laura's car, license, and phone, and discarded them at the complex, an attempt to give her a head start to escape her problems before her family found out. His intention, he claimed, was to buy her some time to sort out her issues. He acknowledged trying to mislead everyone, including the police, in order to protect her because he cared about her. However, when police asked Tyler about Laura's current location, he denied knowing where she is now. But the police were not convinced by his story. Unbeknownst to Tyler, investigators had already discovered other messages on his phone, which painted a different picture of his relationship with Laura. A closer look at his phone revealed they discovered that Tyler has been texting with other women. It turns out Laura isn't his only girlfriend. As the police dug deeper, they discovered that Tyler and Laura had a troubled 10-year relationship. This new information was sparked from Laura's father, Mark, who had always felt uneasy about Tyler. According to Mark, Tyler had never made an effort to be with Laura on important occasions, such as holidays and birthdays, which made him question Tyler's commitment to his daughter. What's more, Mark knew that Tyler was also dating another woman, Christina Wagner, who was a teacher like Laura. Further investigation led the police to friends of both Tyler and Christina. They revealed that Tyler had been leading a double life. It turned out that Tyler had met Christina in 2012 and had been living with her while still in a relationship with Laura. Friends of they told police that Christina and Tyler had gotten engaged and were planning to get married in 2018. When asked about Laura, Tyler's friends claimed that she had become aggressive and that Tyler was trying to distance himself from her. Police found text messages on Laura's phone that showed she had tried to contact Christina on August 28, 2017. In the messages, Laura expressed her desire to meet Christina to talk about Tyler. Friends claimed Christina was angry at Laura's bold actions and Christina confronted Tyler about it. Christina decided to file a police complaint. However, when police told Christina, Laura, and Tyler would have to go to court to get a restraining order, Tyler changed his mind and withdrew. Investigation revealed that Christina and Tyler had planned to spend the Labor Day weekend shopping for their wedding, but Tyler couldn't make it due to a knee injury. When police told Laura's family about Christina, they shared with officers what Laura had confided in them, that Tyler was being stalked by Christina. This new information made it more likely that Tyler could be a suspect in Laura's disappearance. Police brought Tyler in for questioning again, this time confronting him about Christina. Initially, he denied any involvement with her, but police were able to challenge his claim with evidence of his secret life. Eventually, Tyler admitted to cheating on both women, which had led to his fight with Laura. When investigators spoke with Tyler, he expressed his desire to mend his relationship with Laura. However, when asked about Laura's disappearance, he maintained that he was not involved. Unbeknownst to Tyler, the police discovered a connection between him and a vacant field in Damascus through his phone records. They found a link to a meat processing plant called KS Cuts, which was adjacent to the property that Tyler had visited with Laura. The plant's owner also owned the field they had visited. Interviews with the owner revealed that Tyler had previously worked for him and often helped him hunt on the property. Further questioning led to a disturbing discovery. Over the Labor Day weekend, Tyler had requested access to the safe on the owner's property, which contained 420 caliber rifles with ammunition. This new information led police to suspect that Laura may have been killed, but they could not confront Tyler yet. They still needed to find Laura and gather evidence to prove their suspicions correct. Laura's family, along with the police, devised a plan to try to get Tyler to reveal Laura's location. On September 11, 2017, Tyler joined Laura's parents, Mark and Gwen, at a press conference to appeal for Laura's safe return. However, this plan was set up as a trap. The police and Laura's family were hoping Tyler would make a mistake and reveal information about Laura's whereabouts. Meanwhile, police officers and cadaver dogs searched the fields near the meat processing plant in Damascus. During the press conference, Tyler made an emotional appeal for Laura's safe return. In his speech, he hinted that Laura shouldn't be ashamed of anything she'd done wrong. Tyler's speech included the following words: "Laura, if you're listening, it doesn't matter what happened. It doesn't matter what trouble you're in. We're going to fix it together, you, me, and your family. There are so many people who miss you, who are looking for you, and who are praying for your safety. We don't sleep or eat, we just pray that you're safe. I ask you to let us know that you're safe." Tyler claimed to be worried about Laura's disappearance, but what he didn't know was that he was the main suspect in the case. At the time, he seemed genuinely concerned, saying he was doing everything he could to find Laura and praying for her safe return. However, the situation took a devastating turn on September 13, 2017, just 2 days after the press conference. A secluded area of a field was identified as the location of Laura Wallen's body after K-9 dogs detected something suspicious. Upon further investigation, detectives discovered a freshly dug grave and recovered Laura's body at 5:30 p.m. The police were able to identify the body by matching the clothes Laura was wearing to a picture Jennifer had shown them from her last conversation with Laura. The discovery marked a tragic end to the desperate search for Laura. Laura Wallen, a highly respected teacher at Wild Lake High School and recent Teacher of the Year, tragically passed. The incident occurred around noon. Unfortunately, her unborn child also did not survive. The same day, Tyler Tessier, Laura's boyfriend, was arrested and charged with her murder. Tyler held at the county jail while investigators awaited the initial autopsy report. The report confirmed that Laura had been shot in the back of the head before being buried in the field. When Tyler was confronted with evidence, he created a false story. He claimed that on Sunday evening, he and Laura were at her house when a group of African American men burst in, took them hostage at gunpoint, and drove them to Damascus. According to Tyler, the men spared his life but shot Laura in the head, forcing him to bury her in a field. They threatened to harm him if he revealed their identities or led the police to Laura's body. However, police did not believe this story because they knew the relationship between Tyler and the property owner. Tyler then changed his story, claiming that he and Laura had an argument, which ended with him pushing her, causing her to fall, hit her head. He assumed she had died and buried her in the field to hide her body. Later, Tyler claimed that he had reconsidered and thought Laura might still be alive. To end her suffering, he dug up the grave, shot her in the head, and covered his tracks. He described this as a mercy killing. Tyler was held without bail at the Montgomery County Detention Center. Laura and her unborn son, baby Reed, were laid to rest in a public cemetery on September 30, 2017. Over 1,000 people, including Laura's family, friends, and students, attended the funeral to pay their respects to the beloved teacher. The prosecution, led by Montgomery County State Attorney John McCarthy, was building its case against Tyler. As they investigated, they developed a theory about Tyler's double life. They believed that Tyler was willing to continue living a secret life until Laura discovered his relationship with Christina. Fearing his deception would be exposed, Tyler began planning to kill Laura so he could continue his life with Christina. Tyler saw Labor Day weekend as the perfect opportunity to carry out his plan. With Christina out of town and Laura's family away, no one would be able to ask him about Laura's whereabouts until the weekend was over, giving him time to come up with an alibi. He chose a location he was familiar with, where he knew he could access the necessary equipment through a friend. The area was also isolated, making it unlikely that anyone would think to look for Laura there. Tyler fabricated a story about Laura's infidelity to throw her family and investigators off his trail. He deliberately left her car and belongings near her workplace, tried to create false evidence that she had run away because of a scandalous affair. However, Tyler made critical mistakes, constantly changing his alibi, which raised suspicions among the police from the start. Moreover, Tyler underestimated Laura's family, who had noticed that his relationship with Laura was unusual from the beginning. They felt that he never had the responsibility to her as a real-life partner. The prosecution had built a strong case against Tyler, presenting a convincing argument. However, Maryland law only allowed Tyler to be charged with Laura's murder. The death of her unborn child was not considered a separate crime under Maryland law, and this decision would be disputed during Tyler's trial in September 2018. On September 6, 2018, the pursuit of justice for Laura Wallen and her unborn son, baby Reed, came to an abrupt end. Tyler Tessier, the individual responsible for their deaths, was found hanging in his jail cell around 5 a.m. He had been allowed to shower and have breakfast before taking his own life. The news was a devastating blow to Laura's family, who had been seeking justice for their loved ones. They remembered Laura as a bright and loving person. According to reports, Tyler had written 5 letters indicating that he had planned to take his own life for some time. Laura's family did not get to see Tyler brought to justice. Laura's mother, when described Tyler as a diabolical human, and expressed relief that her family no longer had to worry about him being a part of their society. The case of Laura's murder is a tragedy that will leave many people questioning the nature of evil. It's heartbreaking that Laura and her unborn child were killed by the man she loved and trusted, who had promised her a happy future together. This case serves as a reminder that sometimes, the people we trust the most can be the ones who harm us the most. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Schmidt family. Tyler Schmidt was born on November 13, 1979, in Iowa, USA. He spent his childhood in Cedar Falls, a city home to the University of Northern Iowa. Tyler's early interests led him to join the Boy Scouts, where he earned the distinguished rank of Eagle Scout. This experience fostered his lasting love for nature and the outdoors. Growing up, Tyler enjoyed participating in camps organized by the Lutheran Church, which often brought his family together. Outside of school, he developed skills in playing the trumpet. However, his true passions lay in adventure and sports. At Northern Iowa High School in Cedar Falls, Tyler was a member of the cross-country running team and the swim team. During his free time, he also enjoyed outdoor activities such as canoeing, hiking, and snowshoeing. Tyler's interest in computing led him to Missouri's Truman State University, where he pursued a degree in computer science and met the woman who would become his wife, Sarah. Born in Kansas City on March 27, 1980, Sarah grew up near St. Louis with her siblings, Karen, Jane, and Adam, for part of her childhood. Sarah shared Tyler's passion for the outdoors, particularly bird watching and studying insects. Both had been heavily involved in scouting as young people, with Sarah earning the Girl Scouts' highest honor, the Gold Award. She credited her adventurous spirit to her mother, with whom she had gone backpacking in Central America. Given their compatibility and mutual interests, Tyler knew he had found his soulmate when he met Sarah. Sarah was a high-achieving student who excelled both academically and in leadership. As a result of her outstanding leadership skills, her the prestigious Truman Scholarship while she was still at Washington High School in Washington, Missouri. This scholarship led her to attend Truman State University, where she met her future husband, Tyler. The couple started dating and eventually got engaged. Both families were supportive of their decision to marry, as they believed the two were meant to be together and start a beautiful family. On June 22, 2002, friends and family gathered at St. John Lutheran Church in Cedar Falls for Tyler and Sarah's special day. Guests took their seats under the guidance of the wedding coordinators, with Tyler's parents and Sarah's mother seated at the front, joined by her nearby siblings. Tyler's uncles and cousins were also in attendance. Sarah stood outside, preparing to make her grand entrance at her wedding ceremony. She was accompanied by her father, who would escort her down the aisle and give her away to her fiancé. The ceremony was a promise of love and commitment between the 22-year-old couple who vowed to stand by each other until the end of their lives. Following the wedding, Tyler and Sarah embarked on a romantic 10-day honeymoon to the breathtaking Boundary Waters, a wilderness area on the US-Canada border, situated between Minnesota and Ontario. This destination was chosen for its natural beauty, reflecting the couple's shared love of nature. After Tyler and Sarah got married, they focusing on building economic stability and advancing their careers. Following the completion of their bachelor's degrees in Missouri, they relocated to Lawrence and attended the University of Kansas. There, Sarah pursued a master's degree and later worked as a computer science expert, while Tyler divided his time among various roles, including jobs at a supermarket, a delivery company, UPS, and 18 years at a company that handled business billing and payments. During their early years of marriage, Tyler and Sarah maintained a balance between their professional lives and personal adventures. They made time for each other and regularly explored new outdoor destinations. The couple was social and enjoyed hosting family game nights and gathering with friends to play board games. They also participated in local community activities through the Lutheran Church and actively supported the Kansas Jayhawks basketball team, often attending tournaments at the Allen Fieldhouse. 2013 is a bittersweet year for Tyler and Sarah. It was the year Sarah's father unexpectedly passed away due to a heart attack, causing immense grief for his loved ones. However, in the same year, they welcomed their first child, Arlo, after 11 years of marriage. In 2015, the family grew again, with the birth of their beautiful daughter, Lula Schmidt, on September 17th. 3 years later, when their children were 6 and 3, the family decided to relocate to Cedar Falls to be near Tyler's relatives. The community of Cedar Falls provided them a warm welcome, and they quickly became involved in local activities. Tyler maintained his software engineering job, while Sarah started working as a librarian's assistant at the local public library. Their children, Arlo and Lula, began attending preschool at Lincoln Elementary School. Known for their kind and helpful nature, Tyler and Sarah made those around them feel valued. This endearing quality earned them the love and respect of their neighbors and the community. Sarah's friendly and warm personality also made her a beloved figure at the library, where she was admired by colleagues and patrons alike. Tyler and Sarah made it a priority to share their love for the outdoors with their children, Arlo and Lula, encouraging them to explore and appreciate nature. In 2021, the family began going on camping trips, which the kids greatly enjoyed, even with their busy schedules. As a result, they decided to go on these trips as often as possible. However, by mid-2022, Sarah's work hours had increased substantially, which may have affected their ability to continue this family tradition. However, in June 2022, she took a day off to celebrate a special milestone, her 20th wedding anniversary. She also planned a family vacation to Mata Cave State Park in Jackson County, Iowa, for the week of July 11th. To make time for this trip, she set a deadline for a library project. July 26th, Sarah shared her plans with her sister-in-law, Kat, and was looking forward to exploring the park's 13 remarkable caves and beautiful landscapes with her family. On Thursday, July 21st, the Schmidt family embarked on a 140-mile road trip to visit Makata Caves. The family, consisting of Tyler and Sarah, both 42, and their children Arlo, 9, and Lula, 7, arrived at the campsite before 5 p.m. due to the crowded camping area. The Schmidts decided to set up their tent near the park's entrance. Later that evening, around 7 p.m., another family, the Sherwins, arrived and parked approximately 200 feet away from the Schmidts' tent. Joe, Cecilia, and their 23-year-old son, Anthony, from Nebraska, had been on a week-and-a-half-long camping trip that took them to Michigan's Upper Peninsula. When they were on their way back home, they decided to stop at Makata Caves, setting up 2 tents, one for the parents and another for their son Anthony. Anthony consistently showed great care and consideration for his parents' needs, and earning praise from his mother, who frequently described him as the ideal son, kind, empathetic, and an outstanding student. At the time, Anthony was working on a business venture that involved developing a computer system. He claimed the business had the potential to generate millions and planned to use some of the profits to support his parents financially. However, Cecilia knew very little about the project, as Anthony maintained secrecy and only revealed that he communicated via emails that were heavily encrypted and secure. At Makata Caves, campers had settled in for the night. However, their peaceful night's sleep was disrupted before dawn on July 22nd by the sudden sound of gunshots. A short time earlier, a man wearing black had entered the Schmidt family's tent. Inside, the attacker targeted Tyler and then Sarah. Arlo, who had been asleep, was jolted awake by the screams of his sister Lula. As he turned to see what was happening, he saw blood and was overcome with fear. Managing to escape the tent, Arlo ran to find help. As he fled, he heard the sound of one final gunshot. Cecilia and Joe, from the adjacent campsite, quickly exited their tent due to the commotion. Joe began searching for his son among the other campers, inquiring if anyone had seen him. Meanwhile, Arlo, still panicked, continued running until he met Cecilia and Joe. He was frantic, shouting and asking for help, explaining that his parents had been shot. Concerned for Arlo's safety, Cecilia took his hand, and together they rushed to the park entrance. She was filled with anxiety, knowing her own son was sleeping near the tent where the shots were fired, and feared he might have been hurt or worse. Cecilia called 911 after hearing gunshots and reported the incident to the operator, but struggled to clearly say the park's name, making it difficult to communicate their exact location. Cecilia also explained that she was with a boy who claimed his parents had been shot. During the 23-minute call, the 911 operator asked Cecilia questions, while simultaneously relaying the attack to police and park rangers. The call was briefly dropped, but Cecilia quickly called back. Despite the chaotic situation and her own nervousness, Cecilia managed to remain calm, thanks in part to adrenaline. Once she had provided more specific location details, Cecilia handed the phone to Arlo. Arlo explained to the operator that he had witnessed a horrific scene at his family's campsite. He said the operator that he was in a tent with his parents and sister, but when he woke up, he saw a person wearing black and holding a gun. When asked about his father's location, the boy was silent for a while, then responding that he thought his father was hurt. At 6:30 a.m., police and paramedics arrived, and after locating the Schmidt's tent, they discovered a horrific scene. All the occupants, including Tyler, Sarah, and Lula, were dead. This previously peaceful campsite had quickly become a crime scene. Police immediately launched a search for the shooter, who could potentially still be in the area. Following the attack, authorities promptly evacuated everyone from Makata Caves State Park and nearby Camp Shalom, a Christian summer camp about 1.5 miles away. The evacuees were assembled outside the park for a head count, which revealed that only one person, Anthony Sherwin, was missing. It was also discovered that Anthony was armed. An aerial search by police helicopters led to the discovery of a man's body at 11 a.m. Once officers reached the location, they found the man was deceased. He was identified as Anthony Sherwin. Preliminary investigations pointed to Anthony as the primary suspect in the murders. Authorities believed he had perpetrated the attack on the Schmidt family before taking his own life. The park was temporarily closed by authorities following the incident, with the closure lifted by July 28. The Iowa Department of Natural Resources offered its condolences for what had occurred. A spokesperson for the department expressed deep sadness and disappointment on behalf of the team, acknowledging that the incident had disrupted the long-standing tradition of Iowa families enjoying the state's natural beauty. However, the department remains committed to continuing its work in preserving the state's parks for the millions of families that visit each year. The citizens of Cedar Falls were deeply shocked when they received the news. The atmosphere in the town drastically somber and mournful. Family, friends, acquaintances, and even strangers were filled with grief. A heartfelt message was displayed in a window at the Cedar Falls Public Library, where Sarah had worked, paying tribute to Tyler, Sarah, and Lula, saying they may have left too soon, but their memories would remain forever in the hearts of those who knew them. After hearing of the tragedy, Tyler's software company mourned him, describing him as a highly skilled and dedicated professional who mentored his colleagues. His colleagues were deeply saddened by the news, remembering Tyler's love for his children, especially his child Arlo. The mayor of Cedar Falls shared his grief on Facebook over the loss of the 3 Schmidt family members. He knew Sarah, with whom he had worked on a technology project in the past. He called on the community to support Arlo, the sole survivor of the family, and shared a GoFundMe link for those wishing to donate. The initiative quickly raised more than $276,000 in just a few days. As a sign of respect for Sarah's co-workers, the local authority closed the library for the remainder of the day. The tragedy also drew reactions from other government leaders. The governor of Iowa conveyed her shock and sorrow over the unimaginable tragedy, while a U.S. House representative from Iowa denounced the crime as senseless and horrific. Sarah's family was deeply saddened by her passing. Her sister was particularly hard-hit, finding it impossible to accept that she would no longer be able to talk to Sarah and that she would miss out on seeing her niece grow up. Family members came from as far away as North Dakota, Texas, and Michigan to attend a private funeral service for Sarah at Greenwood Cemetery on August 2nd. A separate celebration of the lives of Tyler, Sarah, and Lula was held at the picnic area of Overman Park, attracting more than 200 people. At the ceremony, Tyler's aunt and the mayor took turns speaking at the podium to express their feelings and share memories of the deceased. The Schmidt family's loved ones struggled to cope with their grief, also as trying to provide comfort and care to Arlo. Meanwhile, authorities pressed on with their investigation into the brutal crime. According to an official update from the Iowa Department of Public Safety, the autopsies revealed crucial information about the victims' causes of death. Tyler sustained both a gunshot wound and multiple sharp force injuries. His wife, Sarah, had multiple sharp force injuries, but no gunshot wound. Tragically, their young daughter, Lula, suffered both a gunshot wound and was strangled. In August 2022, authorities identified Anthony Sherwin, a 23 years old with no prior crimes, as the person responsible for the Schmidt family's murder. He acted alone and later ended his own life. Despite the thorough investigation, police were unable to determine a motive for the attack. According to the Assistant Director of Criminal Investigation, Anthony had no connection to the Schmidt family before or during the time the two parties camped near each other. The Nebraska Police Department helped investigate the incident. During a search of the Sherwin family's apartment in Nebraska, officers did not find a suicide note or any other clues that could explain why Anthony targeted the Schmidt family and himself. A review of Anthony's Facebook page also did not provide any information about the incident or the weapons used. According to the Assistant Director of the Iowa Division of Criminal Investigation, the only confirmed weapon found was an unlicensed, hand-assembled firearm discovered near Anthony's body. This type of firearm is often referred to as a ghost gun. Because these guns lack serial numbers, they can be challenging for authorities to track and regulate. To verify the story, the police spoke with Anthony's parents. They confirmed that their son had created his own gun using instructions he found online. His parents described Anthony as very responsible and stressed that he had never hurt anyone or any animals. They also shared that their family had never owned guns before, but due to increasing crime rates in Nebraska, they had recently decided to acquire them. As they were inexperienced with firearms, they even took classes to learn how to handle them. The parents Anthony's had brought a homemade gun on the trip for protection against crime and possible bear attacks, which they had previously encountered while camping. They planned to dispose of the gun after returning home. Anthony's parents believed he was innocent and wanted to prove it. They thought he was a victim of murder, not the killer. His mother pointed to an autopsy report they obtained, which showed he had been shot twice. This contradicted the police claim that he had been shot only once. Anthony's mother questioned how he could have shot himself twice, which raised doubts about the police theory that he had taken his own life. The family Anthony's questioned the attacker's clothing description, as Cecilia remembered telling the 911 operator that the attacker wore black clothes. This did not match Anthony's clothes, green shorts that she had given him the day before the incident. Furthermore, Cecilia and Joe believe the police have withheld important information from them, such as where Anthony's body was found and whether the gun used to kill the family Schmitz was the same gun used to shoot Anthony. They specifically asked investigators if a ballistic test was conducted to confirm any matches, but received no response. Cecilia expressed her concerns in an email to the media. In the email, she said that her son had so many reasons to live, and she was sure that he would not give up everything in such a way. Cecilia also mentioned that she had seen no signs of him planning such an attack. And in her opinion, Anthony did not have the capability to kill. Furthermore, she believed that her son had no connection to the Schmidt family, which raised more questions. When Cecilia reached out to investigators, their response only added to her confusion. They simply mentioned that it was a random murder. Anthony's parents asked to see the final investigation report so they could arrange for a private review to be conducted. However, they state that they never received a response to this request. Around the same time, in January 2023, a news organization also requested public documents related to the case, but was still waiting for them. According to Iowa's Open Records Law and the Freedom of Information Act, a request was made for various documents related to the case, including incident reports, investigation files, crime scene summaries, and autopsy reports. However, the Iowa Department of Public Safety Commissioner's office responded that these documents were not publicly available. They could only release basic information about the case, which had already been included in the press release and its supplementary links. A few days after the inquiry, the media outlet sent an email to the official asking if the gun Anthony used to kill himself was the same one used in the Schmidt family murders or not. The official did not respond. So far, the police believe Anthony was a random killer who brutally murdered family Schmidt by shooting, stabbing, and strangling them. This conviction stands unless new evidence surfaces to prove otherwise. Anthony was also murdered, and those who knew him described him as kind, studious, and innocent. Following traumatic incident, Arlo, the sole survivor of a massacre, came to live with his relatives in Cedar Falls, CU the law entre qua Sarah. Recently, in an interview, Sarah's brother expressed admiration for Arlo's courage and the young boy's remarkable mental resilience. Following the tragedy, a fundraising page on GoFundMe was established to collect money for Arlo's care and to create a fund that will support his future education. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Isla Reynolds. Isla Reynolds was born on April 4, 2010 in Waterville, Maine, USA. With blonde hair, blue eyes, and a charming smile, she was an adorable child who loved music and dancing. Her parents, Trista Reynolds and Justin DiPietro, had a brief romantic relationship in the summer of 2009, which resulted in Trista becoming pregnant. However, the couple broke up and Justin was initially a bit apprehensive about becoming a father, even doubting whether he was really the biological father of the child. When Trista gave birth to Isla, the child bore a strong resemblance to Justin, but he initially refused to acknowledge Isla as his daughter. However, after a paternity test in July 2010, Justin finally accepted his role as her father. As a result, Child Protective Services ordered Justin to pay child support in December 2010. Although Trista and Justin did not have a formal custody agreement in court, they did have an agreement in which Trista, who resided in Portland, would have primary physical custody. It was not until mid-2011, after Isla's first birthday, that Justin began spending time with his daughter. Since he lived an hour and a half away and visits were scheduled to be during the day and very brief, they agreed that Justin could occasionally take Isla with him but never overnight. Trista gave birth to her first child, Isla. Soon after, she became pregnant with her new boyfriend Raymond's child. In 2011, Trista had her second child, a son named Raymond Jr., and Isla became a big sister. Trista cared for both children until October 13, 2011, when Child Protective Services intervened due to concerns. The details of the complaint that led to the meeting are unclear, but it is known that Trista had a substance abuse problem. That day, officials gave her an ultimatum: overcome her addiction or lose custody of her children. In order to avoid losing custody, Trista entered a 10-day rehabilitation program and left the children in the care of her mother and sister. Isla and Raymond Jr. were her world, and she was determined not to lose them. By October 2011, Justin had seen Isla about 5 to 10 times. However, just 4 days after Trista was taken into custody, on October 17, Justin and his family decided to take custody of Isla. Justin's mother, Phoebe DePetro, contacted Child Protective Services and was approved to take Isla. The agency promptly notified Trista's relatives of the decision. However, Isla's aunt, Jessica, strongly disagreed with Child Protective Services' decision, accusing Justin of abusing Isla in the past and expressing concerns for the child's well-being. The officials argued that a father had more custody rights than an aunt. After being granted permission, Justin and his family went to pick up Isla, but they did not know the exact address. To resolve the issue, Child Protective officials provided the location through Officer Charles Weaver. Officer Charles accompanied Justin and his mother to Jessica's home, where Isla was staying with her aunt. While the grandmother waited in the car, Justin and Officer Charles approached the door. A dramatic scene ensued as Jessica pleaded with the police not to take Isla away, warning that she would not give up the child willingly. Despite the stress, police observed that Isla appeared to be very happy, constantly laughing, playing, and even trying to strike up a conversation. Trista's sister, Jessica, asked the police to observe how Isla's behavior changed when Justin arrived. When Justin approached, Isla immediately began crying and tried to get away from him. Despite her distress, the police handed Isla over to her father. Isla struggled and screamed, even trying to bite the police officer when she was placed in Justin's arms. Jessica explained to Officer Charles that Isla was extremely afraid of her father and that it was not in her best interest to take the child away from her family. Charles explained that if it were up to him, he would not let Isla go with Justin, but that it was not his decision and that he was there to enforce the directive from Child Services. In order to transfer custody, one option is to reach an agreement with the child's mother or seek the judge's approval through a court proceeding. However, in a recent custody exchange, neither of these steps were taken. Instead, the decision was made by the Child Protective Services supervisor. Unfortunately, the supervisor awarded custody to the child's father, Justin. Before the court grants sole custody to a parent, it typically conducts a thorough evaluation, including a background check and home visit. However, this did not occur in Isla's case. The primary consideration in custody decisions is the best interests of the child, but there are no records to support the decision made in Isla's case. Analysts say the only reason to remove a child from her maternal relatives is if the child is in imminent danger. If officials believed Isla was in danger, it is unclear why her younger brother, Raymond Jr., was not removed from the home. The father took her to his family home in Waterville. His 47-year-old mother, Phoebe, his 24-year-old sister, Alicia, and her young daughter, Gabriella, also lived there. Justin, the 25-year-old father, lived in a basement, a large, partially finished room, while the rest of the family lived upstairs. Trista called Justin every day during his rehabilitation to talk to Isla and make sure everything was okay. She did not notice anything unusual in these calls. On October 20, 2011, when Trista was on her 8th day of treatment, a meeting was held to discuss Isla's situation. Attendees included members of Child Protective Services, 2 doctors, Trista, her sister Jessica, an attorney, and Justin, who participated by phone. As a result of the discussion, an agreement was reached that Isla would be returned to Trista on October 22, 2011, after completing her addiction recovery program. It was also decided that Justin would take Isla to a treatment center on October 21 to visit her mother. Although things initially seemed to be going well for Trista, the situation soon took a turn for the worse, with no agreement being made and implemented. Trista desperately sought the help of Child Protective Services to enforce their original agreement, but her repeated calls were unsuccessful. So she proposed a temporary solution to Justin. He would continue to care for their daughter, and she would have regular visitation rights to Isla. However, on November 12, 2011, Justin took their daughter to the emergency room after she was injured. After conducting relevant tests, doctors determined that she had a broken arm. Justin told the doctor that the accident happened the night before, November 11th. It was raining, he said, and he slipped and fell on her while on the porch with Isla in his arms. He added that although the girl was crying, she did not appear to be injured, and it was not until the next morning that it became clear that she needed urgent medical attention. By the following Monday, the orthopedist said that surgery was not necessary and that the injury would heal on its own. A week later, on November 26th, at a third medical appointment to assess the child's progress, the specialist said everything was going according to plan. Trista was present at that medical appointment to closely monitor her daughter's recovery, never thinking that it would be the last time she would hold her. The mother's decision to seek custody of Isla marked a turning point. On December 15, 2011, she filed a petition with the court to begin the custody process due to ongoing disputes over visitation and communication with her daughter. Just 2 days later, on December 17, 2011, Justin contacted the police, reporting Isla missing from his mother's home, where he was staying with his girlfriend Courtney Roberts and his sister Alicia. According to Justin, Isla had been put to bed the night before, but when they woke up, the 20-month-old was no longer there. That morning, Trista had gone to visit her husband Raymond at a correctional facility in a coastal Maine town near the Canadian border. Raymond was serving time for arson. Trista was in the passenger seat, asleep, while her father-in-law, Robert Fourier, drove. Robert receives a call from Trista's father with alarming news: Trista's child, Isla, is missing. Robert is momentarily stunned by the news, then finds a safe place to stop the car and wake Trista. Still half asleep, Trista hears her father's voice on the phone and tries to grasp the terrible news of her child's disappearance. Panicked, she immediately instructs Robert to change direction and go meet the police who are looking for Isla. Trista's hour-and-a-half journey feels like a century as she anxiously tries to contact Justin, growing increasingly frightened when he does not answer her calls. Upon arriving at the police station, Trista and her father-in-law, Robert, give their statements. 30 minutes later, Trista's father joins them. Justin called 911 at 8:49 a.m. that morning to report her missing, saying that Isla was last seen the night before at 10 p.m. by Justin's sister, Alicia, who had gone to check on Isla before going to bed. However, by Saturday morning, Isla had disappeared from her crib, with Justin not specifying the exact time she had gone missing in the call. Justin's theory was that Isla had been abducted by a stranger. As news of her disappearance quickly spread, the police quickly launched an investigation. In a statement to the media, the police chief assured that they were working diligently to find Isla at all costs. To aid in the search, the police thoroughly searched the house for any potential clues that could lead them to Isla. On the second day of the search, Sunday, December 18th, trained search dogs were brought in to assist. The area around the house where Isla was last seen was thoroughly searched, and a detailed search was conducted at Trista's home. Due to the search, Trista had to temporarily stay in a motel with her mother and youngest son. By December 19th, the third day after the disappearance, the FBI was brought in to assist in the search. By this time, approximately 75 people from various agencies were involved in the investigation. State police had seized 2 vehicles from Justin's home, a 1996 Ford Explorer owned by Justin and a silver 4-door sedan owned by Justin's girlfriend, Courtney, who had been present the night of the disappearance. The news quickly attracted local media attention, and in the days that followed, Trista appeared in several local media outlets, criticizing Justin and implying that he was responsible for the disappearance. As the news spread nationwide, Trista continued to express her concerns, saying that Justin, as the last person to see her daughter alive, was the only one who could answer her questions. Finally, Justin released a statement to the media on Wednesday, asserting that he knew nothing about Isla's disappearance and assuring the public that he and his family would cooperate fully with the investigation to ensure Isla's safe return. However, in his statement, Justin admitted that Isla was in his sole custody at the time of her disappearance. But he lied, saying this was achieved through an agreement with the mother. Furthermore, he added that Trista was incapable of caring for the child. As time went on, the search effort expanded. The FBI's Child Abduction Rapid Deployment Team, CARD, canvassed the neighborhood, knocking on every door. They contacted every household, returned to the area multiple times, and interviewed neighbors to gather vital information. With a team of 75 dedicated officers, the police demonstrated their unwavering commitment to solving the case. Within 10 days of Justin's initial report, police had spent approximately 5,000 hours searching and were actively pursuing 330 leads. A massive search effort for Isla involved approximately 50 civilian volunteers from a search and rescue association. In addition, a $30,000 reward was offered to anyone who could provide valuable information that could assist in finding Isla. Isla's devoted mother, Trista, played a key role in bringing the case to the forefront. She worked with the support group to organize numerous events, such as vigils and parades, to honor Isla's memory. Her persistence ensured that the case remained in the public eye, with news cameras continuing to cover the story. Trista, along with other spokespeople, provided reporters with updates to keep the story on the front page. Initially, police treating the case as a missing persons investigation rather than a homicide. However, began to change when police sealed off Justin's home and the surrounding area. Police also seized his car and made a major announcement, further altering the public's perception of the case at the direction of the head of the Criminal Prosecution Agency, who made a public announcement. The police officially ruled out the possibility that Isla had run away on her own. On the 13th day of the investigation, the sheriff transferred the case to the state police's Major Crimes Unit. In this announcement, a difficult reality was revealed. The case had been moved from a missing persons investigation to a criminal investigation. In the early days, Justin kept a low profile and avoided the media, but over time, he began to appear more frequently. In one of his interviews on the Today Show, he addressed the change in the law enforcement message, asserting that Isla had been kidnapped and begging the person who kidnapped her to bring her home. He stated that he went on the show to approach whoever kidnapped his daughter and tell them that their actions were wrong. He stressed that they had no right to make such a decision because they were not her father and stressed that Isla needed to stay home with her family. When asked about his previous silence, Justin admitted that he had refrained from speaking out because he initially thought Isla would return. He said that the police had advised him to stay away from the media, a part confirmed by a Department of Public Safety spokesperson. The spokesperson clarified that this advice was only given initially and that the police had later encouraged Isla's parents to make more public appearances. Justin addressed the allegations against him directly. He invited the TV host to spend a day with him to see firsthand what he was going through. He expressed his appreciation for the police's efforts. Justin stressed that the truth remains the same, no matter how many times someone may be accused or called a liar. He believes that the truth is patient and will eventually come out. In late January, police announced that Isla's blood had been found in several locations in Justin's home. They also indicated that, although there was not enough evidence to make an arrest, Justin, Courtney, and Alicia, the three adults who lived in the home where Isla was last seen, were considered suspects. Stephen McCausland, a spokesman for the Department of Public Safety, stated that the family's account of the events was not supported by any forensic evidence, dismissing the possibility that someone had broken into Isla's bedroom undetected and taken her while the three adults were in the home. 6 months after Isla was reported missing. On May 30, 2012, police stated that there was no possibility that she was still alive. Trista's family allowed reporters into their home for a press conference announcing the news. Upon hearing the news, Trista immediately burst into tears, which quickly turned to anger as she accused Justin of killing her daughter. For Trista's family, learning the details of the forensic tests conducted at Justin's home was extremely difficult. They knew that Isla's blood had been found and that the amount of blood represented 25% of her total blood volume. However, they never saw the evidence until January 2013, when everything that had been discovered was revealed to them. Justin's 1996 Ford Explorer had a child seat in the back, where Isla's blood was found on the left shoulder strap. Dried vomit was also found in the back seat. In the girl's bedroom, police discovered blood on her princess pink sneakers, which were on the floor next to her crib, as well as on the face and arms of her doll. They believe she may have tried to clean the blood from her mouth with her toy. A blood stain was also found on the living room sofa. Most of the blood was found in a basement, where a pool of Isla's blood was found in the middle of the mattress Justin shared with Courtney. In addition, vomit and a pink strand that looked like the hair of a toy were found on the bed. Justin's sneakers, which had Isla's blood on the tongue and inside, were found next to the bed. There were also blood stains on the cement floor around the bed and on the walls, which corresponded to Isla's height. An expert determined that some of the blood drops were the size of a dime, indicating blunt force trauma. Furthermore, experts pointed out that some of the blood spatter in the house could have been caused by Isla's coughing, suggesting that she had suffered both internal and external injuries. Police said that they had used bed sheets to clean up Isla's blood. This was a horrifying revelation for Trista and her family, and they still had many more disturbing details to learn. Luminol tests conducted in the house revealed traces of blood that were not visible to the naked eye. The photo slides from the house left Trista deeply distressed. She panicked and left the police station, now more convinced than ever that her daughter, Isla, had been murdered. The police wanted to show her more photos, but she refused, saying she had seen enough. Months earlier, when the police presented the same photographic evidence, he showed no reaction. The police also tried to show Justin's family the photos. They refused. They were not interested. Justin's girlfriend, Courtney, who was with him the night Isla disappeared, reacted in a similar way. Overwhelmed and helpless, Trista told the press that Justin, Alicia, and Courtney were still walking down the street as if nothing had happened. 8 months after receiving a critical report in September 2013, Trista decided to write a letter to the press about the evidence and photos she had seen. She was frustrated by the slow progress and wanted to rekindle public interest in the case. In the spring of 2016, a group of journalists went to Justin's mother's house. His younger sister, Alicia, answered the door and was asked about the journalist who asked about the blood evidence. She mentioned that Isla was lactose intolerant and had been throwing up. However, a quick online search revealed that common symptoms of lactose intolerance include gas, bloating, abdominal pain, and diarrhea. While nausea and vomiting can occur, they are not the most typical symptoms, let alone vomiting blood. In 2017, at Trista's request, a judge officially declared Isla dead, determining that her death occurred on or about December 17, 2011, when her father, Justin, reported her missing. With this declaration, Trista and her attorney filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Justin, claiming he caused Isla's death through intentional unlawful acts and caused her pain and suffering before her death, including fear, terror, and physical injury. At the time of the lawsuit, Isla was still missing, and Justin, along with his attorney, denied any wrongdoing, describing the lawsuit as baseless. In response, Trista held a press conference where she addressed Justin directly, questioning whether he had a conscience. She said, "I could see it in your eyes, and you knew it was a problem. You looked at me, and I knew you cared." In early 2023, a judge granted Trista's request to add his mother, Phoebe, and his sister, Alicia, to the wrongful death lawsuit. The three defendants are now facing civil charges of wrongful death, intentional infliction of pain and suffering, and unlawful interference with the body of a deceased person. Additionally, Justin faces charges of failing to fulfill his parental duty of care to a minor child. Trista and her attorney understand that they will not receive any financial compensation from Justin. That is not the purpose of the lawsuit. Their purpose is to learn the truth behind Isla's disappearance. There are many strange things about Isla's disappearance. The police informed Trista of a shocking detail. On the morning Isla went missing, Justin drove to Portland and back before calling 911. He claimed that he thought Trista had kidnapped Isla and was looking for Trista, but he never contacted her or any of her family members. Instead, during that long drive, he called a friend who had sold him a $25,000 life insurance policy on Isla just weeks earlier. Adding to the strangeness, Justin stayed at this friend's house while the police were investigating the case. This was surprising, especially since he had been absent from his daughter's life for 9 months of Trista's pregnancy and for most of Isla's life. Trista also shared that she had received strange text messages from Justin in the week after Isla went missing. He expressed fears that someone might try to kidnap Isla. The last time he mentioned someone trying to kidnap her was on December 11th, just 6 days before Isla was reported missing. After her disappearance, his messages became threatening and cryptic, leaving Trista wondering what he really meant. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Sion Kingi. Sion Kingi was born in New Zealand on December 16, 1974. When she was 7, her family moved to New Zealand, a small coastal town in Australia with a population of about 5,000. The area is known for its warm, pleasant climate. From a young age, Sion was a kind and gentle person who loved sports, particularly ballet and netball. Although she was naturally modest, she had a charming personality that made her popular among her peers. Sion was tall, had long blonde hair and striking eyes, which helped her stand out in school. Unfortunately, her beautiful appearance eventually led to serious consequences in her life. Friday, November 27, 1987, was an ordinary day. It was a beautiful sunny day. Typically, this time of year features perfect weather, warm sun and a cool breeze, so many locals were enjoying the beach. Sion's mother, Linda, went to the store to buy food and fabric to sew a lovely outfit for her daughter's upcoming birthday. After school, Sion got on her yellow bike, she knowing she was going to the store to help her mother Linda choose fabric. Linda wanted to select something Sion would love, so she headed to the store right after classes ended. Once they chose the fabric for the dress, they were only free in the afternoon. After making their purchases, Linda planned to stop by the bakery to buy some treats for dinner. Sion was already feeling tired and wanted to head home. She asked her mother if she could go home by herself first. Her mother agreed, and Sion rode her bike along her favorite shortcut. While she had taken this route many times before, it didn't feel as safe today. In the 1980s, New York was a peaceful small town where everyone knew each other, making it one of the safest places in the area. The Kingi family's home was only a few kilometers from the local store, they easily reachable by bike in just a few minutes. Linda felt secure allowing her 12-year-old daughter, Sion, to ride there alone, as nothing bad had ever happened in their quiet town. In fact, her mother would follow her right after buying a few things. At 4:45 p.m., Sion rode her bike toward home, taking a path that went through the park, while Linda drove a different route in her car. Since Sion wasn't biking too quickly, she and her mother were only a few minutes apart. Linda anticipated arriving home just after Sion. However, when returned, Linda found no one at home, Sion was not there, and her yellow bicycle was missing. Initially, Linda wasn't worried about Sion's absence. The girl might have met a friend or stopped by to visit someone, especially with the weekend approaching after a long school week. Teenagers often hang out after classes, and Sion had many friends, so it was normal for her to drop in on someone. Sion had just picked out a beautiful fabric with her mother, Linda, and she could have wanted to share her weekend plans with a friend, as they were also planning to meet up. However, Linda soon began to feel anxious. Sion was well-behaved and never stayed out long without permission. Then, Linda decided to call several of Sion's friends to check if she was with them. To her dismay, no one had seen Sion. By 8 p.m., Sion still hadn't returned home. Although they lived in a small, quiet town with little traffic, Sion always respected the curfew and never wandered outside after dark. On Friday evenings, people often relax and take walks after work. As darkness falls, even the safest towns can become risky. Linda recognized this, so she chose to walk the route that Sion typically took on her bike. This path was the quickest way from their home on the outskirts to the shops in the city. Linda and her husband walked together, and about halfway there, they discovered Sion's yellow bicycle abandoned, but they did not see the girl. The abandoned bike raised concerns, especially since it was Sion's first bike, one she had cherished and would never willingly leave behind. Unfortunately, they couldn't find Sion nearby. Her parents called for her, but there was no answer. They decided to head to the police station. Before leaving, they checked their house to see if Sion had returned and bring a picture of her. With the photo in hand, they went to meet the police. The officers took their report about Sion's disappearance and officially declared her missing. The community was tight-knit, and the city had an extremely low crime rate, so everyone believed Sion would be found quickly. This situation seems to stem from a simple misunderstanding. Sion might have been hanging out with friends or got lost while walking in the forest. However, one officer recalled that there had been a kidnapping in the area shortly before this incident. To address the situation, the police reached out to local media, as they did not have access to social networks or the internet at the time. The following morning, a report about Sion's disappearance was broadcasted, in hopes of finding witnesses who might have seen her the night before. Several people came to the police station with information, but they all insisted they hadn't noticed anything suspicious. These witnesses had seen Linda and Sion while they were picking out fabric for a dress, but none of them saw Sion on their way home, and no one was on the path at that time. The witnesses provided varying details and tried to highlight any unusual occurrences, such as strange cars or odd behavior from local residents. However, they saw that was watching Linda and Sion. A witness reported seeing a dirty white station wagon on the evening of the incident. When police were notified, they discovered the car contained a dark-haired man and a heavy-set woman. They seemed to be aimlessly driving around, possibly searching for someone. It's conceivable that Sion might have come into contact with them. Witnesses noticed this suspicious couple shortly before Sion went missing. The police working on the case noted there were approximately 170,000 station wagons in the area, with about 10,000 of them being white. As a result, the search area has been much wider. Investigators needed to examine all the cars in the region and pursue additional leads. Many police officers and hundreds of volunteers joined the search. Friends, family, neighbors, and members of the community came together to assist in the search for Sion. Ground and air search teams were organized, and photographs of the location where Sion went missing were taken and shared with the media. This method is often used to help potential witnesses recall details about what happened that day. No one was able to provide useful information to the police at first. However, by Sunday, several new witnesses came forward and aided the investigation. The first witness was sunbathing by a stream in the forest when she was attacked by an unknown man. He harassed her and attempted to drag her into his car, which was identified as a white Kingwood station wagon. A second witness saw the incident and assisted the girl in fending off her attacker. Afterward, this witness followed the suspicious vehicle when the driver tried to flee the scene, but he eventually lost sight of them. He managed to give a detailed description of the car and provided the police with its license plate number, 429. The detectives decided to check the phone number associated with the car with that plate number. They found that this number was registered in the area. It belonged to a woman named Valmay Beck. The detectives quickly located her address and visited her home. A man answered the door and confirmed he knew Valmay. He explained that he was not her relative, but her stepson. He also added that her husband was Barry, and they had been married for a year. The description of Barry's closely matched the composite sketch created from the witness's account of the attack near the stream. The suspect's name was Barry Watts. However, the police lacked sufficient evidence to arrest him or accuse him of kidnapping Sion. Despite this, both Barry and Valmay were viewed as potential suspects in the case. Unfortunately, the man didn't know Barry and Valmay's whereabouts. They frequently moved and rented different places, which seemed suspicious. 3 days after Sion disappeared, another witness came forward with information. This witness also reported seeing a white Holden Kingwood near the creek and described the driver as athletic, mentioning a plump woman who was acting suspiciously. After conducting a background check on Barry and Valmay, the police discovered that both had recently been released from prison in Perth, Western Australia, right before Sion went missing. Both Barry and Valmay had extensive criminal records. Just weeks prior, they relocated to Queensland from Perth, pausing their criminal activities after serving their parole. They arrived in a sedan but quickly switched to a white station wagon, which had been linked to several suspicious incidents. The police recognized that they were dealing with dangerous individuals with a long history of armed robberies, break-ins, and forgery related to obtaining fraudulent documents. This was just a portion of Barry and Valmay's criminal history. This news was alarming for the Sion family. If their daughter, Sion, became involved with these individuals, her chances of being found alive and safe were slim. At the time, Barry was 33 years old, and Valmay was 43. Valmay had 6 children from previous relationships. Both police and Sion's family viewed Barry and Valmay as particularly dangerous criminal wanted. The authorities urgently needed to locate they to investigate their connection to Sion's disappearance. 6 days after Sion went missing, a man named Tim visited the police station to report bad news. He reported that the night before, as he was heading to work, he noticed a terrible, foul smell that initially made him think an animal had died nearby. On his way back, he felt compelled to check the area again and was hit by a strong smell of decay. At the side of the road near the stream, he discovered the body of a teenage girl. She was wearing a school uniform and had blonde hair. The police quickly arrived at the location provided by Tim and discovered the mutilated body of a schoolgirl. It was evident that she had been sexually assaulted. The autopsy revealed that she had been strangled, and her body had 12 stab wounds, 3 near her heart and 2 cuts on her throat. Additionally, her spine was broken, and her arms were so badly damaged they were nearly severed from her body. The level of violence indicated that her death was extremely painful. The police suspected that this victim was the missing girl, Sion. She was wearing the same clothes as described by Sion's mother. In the laboratory, a forensic expert confirmed that the victim was 12 years old Sion Kingi. 5 days after this gruesome discovery, family Sion's and friends came together to say their final goodbyes at her funeral. During the ceremony, a classmate read a passage from Peter Pan, suggesting that the girl would always be remembered. Flowers were placed along the route where the young girl had been found. Following media coverage of the incident, a nurse named Nicole Close contacted the police. She reported having seen some suspicious individuals in the area, they driving a white station wagon. One evening, after finishing her shift at the hospital, Nicole was walking through the parking lot to her car when she noticed a white car entering the lot and slowly approaching her. Sensing something was off, she quickly ran to her car, jumped inside, and locked the door. The station wagon did not back away but parked next to her passenger door. A man then got out and approached her window, asking for help with directions. Although he seemed calm and friendly, but she felt uneasy and wanted to end the conversation quickly. She noticed a suspicious-looking woman in the station wagon and thought she saw ropes in the back, which heightened her anxiety. The man continued to speak politely and stepping closer. Despite Nicole explaining the directions multiple times, he kept asking the same question and moved closer to her. Just as he was only a few steps away, Nicole spotted another man walking through the parking lot. The driver noticed him too, which distracted him and gave Nicole the chance to escape. She quickly backed into her car, locked the door, and drove away. Nicole recalled that this incident occurred on November 2nd, before Sion went missing. Investigators viewed the reports about the white car as significant and pursued this lead. Detectives showed Nicole a lineup of photographs featuring unfamiliar faces, and she clearly identified Barry and Valmay. But the testimonies didn't end there. The day after Nicole spoke to the police, another eyewitness came forward with information about a different attempted kidnapping. He reported seeing a man attack a woman on the street, holding a knife to her throat and trying to drag her into a white station wagon. The victim fought back, injuring the attacker's hand with his own knife, and managed to escape. Police then discovered fingerprints belonging to Barry on the woman's car. She also identified Barry and Valmay as likely involved in kidnappings, rapes, and murders in the area. The officers recognized that they were dealing with particularly dangerous criminals who posed a threat to the entire community. They issued descriptions of the suspects, Barry and Valmay, and their white car, making the information public through the media. Although it seemed the criminals were in hiding, but arrest warrants have been sent to police departments nationwide, indicating the possibility that they will be caught soon. In a small town, a local power grid worker was installing wiring when he spotted a car that matched the description of Barry and Valmay's station wagon. He remembered it because of a media alert he had seen a few days earlier. After coming down from his work, He was convinced that this was the car the police were looking for. He quickly went to the police station to mark the location on a map where he had seen the vehicle. When the patrol officers arrived, Barry and Valmay had already fled. Although the police tried to chase them, they lost track of Barry and Valmay once again. Later, the department received a tip about a money transfer made by Barry and Valmay as they were leaving New South Wales. The station wagon was tracked to a motel parking lot, and fortunately, it was still there when the police arrived. The hotel staff allowed the officers to access Barry and Valmay's room. Understanding that they were dealing with potentially armed and dangerous criminals, the officers prepared their weapons. To their surprise, Barry and Valmay did not put up a fight and were arrested in the motel room. The police discovered wigs, hair dye, and a hair clipper, suggesting that they was attempting to change their appearance to evade capture. The suspects, Barry and Valmay, were interrogated for about 12 hours, during which they remained completely silent. Barry did not cooperate at all. He informed the police that he had conspired with his wife, Valmay, to ensure she maintained the same story and did not reveal any important information. In contrast, Valmay quickly gave in. She thought that by doing so, she could reduce her sentence. What she revealed to the authorities was chilling. On November 27th, Valmay claimed that she and Barry were driving around the city in search of a new victim. Barry had an obsession with violence against women, particularly targeting those who were much younger than him. His wife, Valmay, being 10 years older, did not fit his preferences. To fulfill his disturbing desires, Barry started to rape and murder girls who fit his idea of youth and beauty. Valmay claimed she went along with his actions because she was afraid of losing him. On the morning of Sion's disappearance, they spent several hours driving around, believing that finding a girl would be easy. However, most of the girls were with others, making it difficult to kidnap someone discreetly. Barry attempted to approach a number of girls himself, but they managed to evade him. Eventually, he realized that he was not as trustworthy as his wife, so he decided to use Valmay as bait to attract the girls. They parked near a local park and got out of the car. While walking along the trail, they noticed a girl on a yellow bicycle. Barry selected her as his target, and Valmay pretended to be in distress, asking the girl for help because she was having trouble with her dog. Sion, a kind-hearted girl, came Valmay and engaging in conversation. At that moment, Barry attacked Sion from behind, muffling her screams and dragging her into his dirty car. Inside, he restrained her with tape. Valmay sat in the back seat with Sion, while Barry drove away. They traveled 12 kilometers from where the abduction occurred and stopped in a forest. There, Barry laid out a blanket and started raping Sion for several hours, fulfilling his twisted desires. Valmay later reported that Sion showed incredible courage throughout the process of being raped by Barry, she enduring the abuse without crying. She complied with Barry's demands, hoping her obedience would somehow spare her life and that they might let her go. However, from the start, Barry never planned to let her live. His intent was to satisfy his twisted fantasies. Barry started to strangle the Sion and stabbed her with a knife, causing fatal injuries. Throughout this horrific scene, Valmay watched without intervening. She later reported that the belt used for strangling Sion, along with the knife and other items, were discarded nearby in a stream. The police went to the specified location, and Valmay provided them with details about the crime scene. They were able to recover evidence, including light-colored hair that seemed to belong to Sion. Valmay's confession took up 28 pages, describing the terrible ordeal the young victim Sion endured before her death. Although Barry remained unyielding during the interrogation, he became enraged upon learning of his wife's confession, Valmay. To ensure Barry was convicted, investigators attempted to extract a confession from him. However, they were unable to do so. As a result, They decided to use a complex strategy. They planned to place an undercover agent in the temporary detention cell where Barry was held. This spy will spend time with Barry as a fellow prisoner, aiming to establish a friendly relationship with him, which will hopefully lead to receiving a confession from him. A special spy was chosen for this dangerous mission because he was able to withstand the psychological pressure that the mission would cause. He was supposed to listen to Barry confess about the brutal treatment of Sion. But ultimately, this mission did not result in a confession. Meanwhile, Barry remained agitated and was desperately trying to escape punishment. During one meeting with his wife, Valmay, he subtly suggested that she should end her life before the trial to avoid testifying against him. He implied that if she chose not to, she would face serious consequences according to state law. Barry communicated with his wife very cautiously, carefully choosing his words to prevent the authorities from using their phone conversations against him. Fortunately, Valmay did not listen to Barry, which ultimately saved her life. When Barry and Valmay arrived at court, around 200 people were present, ready to confront the brutal murderers. During the trial, Valmay testified against her husband, Barry, portraying him as a true monster. She tried to defend herself by claiming she was coerced into the horrific acts. However, there was strong evidence suggesting she participated willingly. On October 20, 1988, the jury began deliberating on the verdict. After 3 hours, the jurors found the defendants Barry and Valmay guilty. Valmay Beck received a sentence of 10 years for kidnapping and life in prison for murder. However, due to her cooperation with the prosecution, she was granted the possibility of temporary release. The jury spent 6 hours discussing Barry's sentence. Finally, Barry Watts was found guilty of murder, kidnapping, and rape, receiving a life sentence without the possibility of parole. His case was officially archived, meaning he would not be eligible for release. However, the story of Barry and Valmay didn't end in prison. Barry started bragging about his crimes and told a cellmate that he had committed a similar offense. He mentioned the murder of 31-year-old teacher, Helen Marie Fenney, who went missing on October 29 of that year. Investigators later discovered that Valmay was also involved in this incident. Valmay admitted to witnessing her husband murder the teacher Helen, after which they placed her body in the trunk of their car and disposed of it in a landfill near Brisbane. Barry remained silent during police questioning, refusing to provide any information about the second victim, Helen. He seemed to hope to challenge the verdict in Sion's case in the future. However, in 2007, he confessed to murdering Sion and detailing the crime. Valmay endured assaults while in her cell, suffering regular beatings, including a severe head injury from a tin can. To ensure her safety, she was transferred to a more secure correctional facility. During her time there, she converted to Christianity and started to make positive changes in her life. Valmay applied for parole 3 times but was denied each time. In 2007, she divorced her husband, Barry. She also struggled with serious health issues, such as obesity and diabetes. In 2008, her health declined significantly, leading doctors to place her in an induced coma immediately after heart surgery. The police hoped that while she was on her deathbed, she would confess to additional crimes that she and Barry was suspected of, including numerous kidnappings, rapes, and murders in the area. Sadly, she passed away at the age of 64 without regaining consciousness, taking with her all the secrets of their horrific crimes. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Matthew Eapen. Sunil and Deborah got married in 1990 after meeting in medical college. Sunil, from Chicago, USA, followed his father's path and became an anesthesiologist, while Deborah worked as an ophthalmologist. Their first child, Brendan, was born in 1994, and their second child, Matthew, born May 24, 1996. They are young parents working in the medical field. They face significant challenges balancing their careers and family life. Both came from respected families with successful backgrounds in education and medicine, motivating them to achieve similar success. They lived in a prestigious area of Boston, Massachusetts, in a lovely home and were financially comfortable enough to hire a nanny. The nanny became like a family member, handling both childcare and household duties, and lived on their property. Deborah soon returned to work part-time, having completed advanced training courses during her pregnancy. Balancing her professional responsibilities with family care was difficult and stressful. The high workload placed on the nannies often led to them leaving due to stress or being dismissed if they couldn't meet the family's expectations. Before hiring 18-year-old Louise Woodward from Cheshire, Great Britain, they used to employ 3 other nannies. Louise lived with her family until she turned 18, then decided to take a gap year in the United States before continuing her education. Although she didn't have formal training, she loved children and got along well with them. She registered as a nanny and housekeeper with a recruiting agency, which helped her move to Boston and find a job. In December 1996, she started working for the Sunil family, whose youngest child, Matthew, was only 8 months old. She had no prior experience with infants, including changing diapers, and had only 3 days of training before she began her job. Louise was given the responsibility of caring for Matthew and 2 years old, Brendan, and assisting with household chores. She quickly found the workload overwhelming due to the family's busy daily routine. All this workload went against Louise's plans, as she had come to the USA seeking adventure and enjoyment, not to work without any days off. She initially thought that being a nanny would provide her with a livelihood without much responsibility. However, looking after children aged 8 months and 2 years truly requires experience, training, and a sense of responsibility. It is challenging to expect an 18-year-old to have such expertise without proper training. Despite this, Sunil and Deborah, who were desperate for help, accepted Louise since they needed a nanny housekeeper. Furthermore, her services were affordable. However, Louise's behavior did not meet the family's high standards, so they gave her a list of rules to follow. As a young nanny, she had little choice because previous failures with other families had put her at risk of being dismissed by the agency. She needed to keep her job to maintain her income. It was challenging for her to suppress her youthful, free spirit, as she preferred to walk, chat with friends, and attend parties rather than focus on work. Occasionally, she would wander around Boston and indulge in her dreams. However, she started refusing work more often, frequently asking for time off, and spending a lot of time on herself. She began taking daily walks, returning late in the evening, regularly attending parties, and struggling to wake up in the morning, often sleeping until nearly lunchtime. This behavior disappointed the Epens, as she would spend hours chatting with her family in the UK, neglecting her responsibilities with the children. One day, Deborah came home from work earlier than usual and found the children sleeping at home alone without any supervision. Later, the nanny Louise returned from a party. There were suspicions that similar incidents had occurred before. Naturally, Sunil and Deborah felt worried about their children and they were not happy with her. They spoke to her and imposed a curfew, but it didn't solve the problem. They were very unhappy with her behavior and felt they weren't getting their money's worth for services. Although they still wanted to trust her, they saw her as lazy and irresponsible. So, the relationship which she began to significantly deteriorate a few days before the unfortunate incident. She openly told Sunil that she didn't enjoy being a nanny and didn't want children because it was difficult, yet she pleaded not to be fired because she desperately needed the job. Sunil made more rules to discipline her, to get the nanny at the level they desired. On February 3, 1997, Deborah informed Louise that she could leave if anything was not to her liking. However, Louise, the nanny, resisted the idea, insisting there was no need to rush and that she was willing to accept and adhere to their new, stricter conditions. They agreed but mentioned they needed to change the children's sleep schedule by limiting sleep after 3 p.m. to prevent disrupting their nighttime rest. This change was not aimed at Louise personally but was necessary to reorganize the children's daily routine. Shortly after this, a terrible tragedy occurred. The tragedy happened just 10 weeks after Louise began her job. On February 4, 1997, Louise woke the children up in the morning after the parents left for work. She mentioned that Matthew was unusually fussy and cried a lot from the start of the day. Louise bathed him and then put him back to bed to calm him down. At 3:15 p.m., she went to wake him up from his nap and noticed he was breathing weakly and irregularly. She took him to the living room to perform CPR, but he remained unconscious. Initially, she couldn't reach Sunil and Deborah and only called 911 at 3:45 p.m. to report that Matthew, the 8-month-old, was not breathing. Louise informed the coordinator that the baby might have choked on vomit because his face was turning blue. Emergency services arrived quickly. The child was alive but in critical condition. The doctors rushed him to the children's hospital, where they found that Matthew had much more severe injuries than initially reported. Matthew, an 8-month-old baby, was found to have a 10-centimeter crack at the base of his skull, bleeding in his eyes, a hematoma between the skull and brain, and bleeding in his neck and back of the brain. He also had a broken wrist, and vomit was found in his trachea. He was urgently taken to the operating room for brain surgery and connected him to a life support machine because he was in a coma. Experienced doctors suggested that these injuries were caused by being violently shaken and hit on the head. In pediatrics, this is known as shaken baby syndrome. Babies are born with disproportionately large heads and weak neck muscles, making them vulnerable to injury when shaken. The unfixed head will dangle when shaken, causing damage to brain cell membranes and brain injury. When a baby is shaken, the brain moves back and forth inside the skull, leading to swelling and bleeding. Adults often shake babies out of frustration when they cry, not realizing it won't calm them down but will make them cry more. Continued shaking can cause severe injuries or even be fatal. Most cases occur in children up to 2 years old, but even a 4-year-old can suffer greatly from such shaking. Around 4 p.m., Deborah, Matthew's mother, noticed she had missed a call from Louise at 3:15 p.m. and also saw an urgent text message from she. Concerned, she left her patient at the hospital and called she, who explained the situation. Deborah was furious. She asked for leave from work and rushed to the hospital where Matthew was admitted. On the way, she prayed that her son would be okay. Upon arrival, she informed the doctors of her medical expertise, as she was an ophthalmologist, and asked to examine her baby. She quickly discovered severe Matthew's eye hemorrhaging. Meanwhile, the doctors alerted the police about the baby's serious injuries, prompting law enforcement to visit the Epen family home to question the nanny. Louise was at home, looking upset and concerned, with Brendan. She explained that Matthew had been irritable and difficult since the morning, and despite her efforts to calm him, nothing worked. By the end of the conversation, she confessed to possibly being a bit harsh with him. Overwhelmed by his continuous crying and screaming, she shook him to try to soothe him, but it was ineffective. In frustration, she threw him onto a pile of towels on the bed. While taking him to the bathroom, she accidentally dropped him, which caused him to hit his head on the floor. Her account was alarming, given the severity of Matthew's injuries. The following day, the police arrested Louise on charges of assaulting a child. Matthew's condition was not improving, and doctors were sure he had no hope of recovery. The brain injury was so severe that, even if he survived, he would be paralyzed for life. Sunil and Deborah, who were also medically educated, understood this. On February 9, 1997, they made the difficult decision to disconnect Matthew from life support, worsening Louise's situation as she was accused of murder. She was denied bail before the trial, but continued to insist on her innocence, maintaining it was a tragic accident. Before the trial on May 7, 1997, Louise agreed to take a polygraph test. During the test, she was asked if she had caused physical harm to Matthew on that day. She denied causing any injury, and a lie detector expert concluded her answers were truthful with 95% confidence. Another expert, hired by her lawyers, also confirmed that she answered all questions truthfully. On October 7, 1997, a trial began in Cambridge, Massachusetts, involving many medical experts, including neurosurgeons, pediatricians, ophthalmologists, and pathologists, all of whom were familiar with similar crimes. In the courtroom, there was extensive discussion about Matthew's injuries and Louise's behavior. Most experts believed that his injuries were caused by abuse and violence. Many doubted Louise's statement that she had accidentally hit the boy's head, noting that the injuries showed signs of blunt force trauma. The child had probably been severely and brutally beaten, and the injuries appeared fresh. An expert for the prosecution initially compared Matthew's injury to those from a fall from the second floor, but this statement was later withdrawn. The defense argued that Matthew's head and wrist injuries occurred weeks prior to the incident, before the nanny was in their home. The lawyer suggested that the child's parents, Sunil and Deborah, could have been involved in neglect or abuse. In court, Louise stated that she had not noticed any injuries to Matthew's head or arm. She explained that her interaction with the child was mild, but it caused the reopening of an old injury, leading to bleeding. She mentioned that the day before the tragic incident, the child fell near the stairs and hurt himself, which might have aggravated the injury. Louise clarified that her use of British English was misunderstood. When she said popped, she meant she placed the child on the bed, not threw him, as might be interpreted in American English, and she denied dropping the baby in the bathtub. The defense argued that if the prosecution's claim of cruel treatment were true, Matthew would have had serious bruises and hematomas on the head and body, which were not present. This suggests that the child might have been shaken to calm him down, but not to the extent the prosecution claimed. Louise, in an emotional outburst, lost control and shook the child, causing old injuries to resurface. Witnesses and experts testified that there was no fresh bleeding in the brain, indicating that the skull fracture was an older injury. However, Sunil and Deborah denied that Matthew had suffered such a traumatic brain injury. The defense suggested that these actions might have been driven by fear, as Louise panicked while trying to revive the child. Unfortunately, Brendan could not testify at the trial because he was too young to understand what had happened. During the trial, Louise acted inappropriately. She occasionally smirked and laughed, which was attributed to nervous shock. At the time, she was reportedly only 18 years old, and the incident described triggered such a reaction. Additionally, she retracted her initial testimony obtained by detectives during the first interview. She did not mention how challenging it was to work for the Eapen family, who overwhelmed her with childcare and household duties, for which she was unprepared. She had come to the United States to relax and have fun. Despite this, she insisted that she never mistreated the children. She claimed she would never harm a child, especially to the extent of causing serious injuries that led to a coma and could paralyze an 8-month-old baby. Louise's relatives from the UK spoke at the trial, praising her as a gentle and reserved person. They described her as an obedient parishioner of a local church, a vegetarian, and a clarinet player. However, her friends from the US had a different view, seeing her as a party girl who never missed a chance to go out. 3 of her friends testified at the trial, as well as former employers who had let her go due to incompetence and irresponsibility. The prosecution highlighted that she tried to wake Matthew 15 to 20 times but found the boy wasn't breathing. She attempted to help him and called his parents, but they didn't answer. It took her half an hour to finally call 911. The prosecutor questioned why she delayed calling for emergency help when immediate action was needed. She explained that she was panicking and stressed, trying hard to manage the situation on her own. Throughout the trial, Louise showed little emotion. She occasionally smiled but never expressed regret for what happened. She spoke fondly of Brendan and Matthew, she describing Brendan as smart and talkative, and Matthew as a sweet, smiling, and playful child. The trial was broadcast live on British television, capturing the attention of almost the entire country, with many people supporting she. On October 30, 1997, a jury found Louise Woodward guilty of second-degree murder. She begged the judge to lighten her sentence. She begged them not to let her spend the rest of her life in prison for something she didn't do. However, the judge ignored her pleas. Louise was sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 15 years. Upon hearing the sentence, she burst into tears, unable to believe what was happening. She questioned the judge, insisting that she hadn't done anything wrong and sincerely hoped for an acquittal. Her mother supported her, stating in court that a terrible judicial error had occurred. She argued that her daughter could not have harmed a defenseless child and that she was innocent and did not deserve such a harsh punishment. In fact, the jury's opinions were mixed. Many people believe that Louise is innocent in Matthew's death, attributing it to an old injury. However, after further deliberation, the jury concluded she was guilty. It later emerged that those who initially supported acquittal were persuaded to vote guilty. This thing sparked significant public outcry in both the United States and Louise's home country, Britain. Many people in the UK donated funds to assist Louise and her family, totaling about $500,000. Additionally, there were mass protests from supporters who believed Louise was an innocent victim of the US legal system. This public pressure led to the conviction being overturned by the judge 10 days later. By then, Louise had already spent about 8 months in prison. After reviewing the case materials, the new judge concluded that Louise's actions were due to her inexperience and immaturity, not malicious intent, and that murder was not her purpose. Louise was sentenced to the time she had already spent in prison awaiting trial, which was 289 days, allowing her to be immediately released. Her supporters celebrated her release like a holiday. Meanwhile, the death of Matthew, the 8-month-old child, was largely overlooked. Even if his death wasn't her fault, his parents sought justice for their child, and the prosecutor was determined to see Louise imprisoned for a longer period. He noted that he had recently been involved in a trial where a father was accused of killing a child in a similar case, and that father remained in prison. He questioned why Louise, a nanny, was released, viewing it as unfair and contradictory given the prevalence of similar cases in U.S. judicial practice. Louise was released from prison after serving less time than it took. She returned to her hometown in the UK in 1998 and enrolled in the Faculty of Law at London South Bank University. She explained that her interest in law developed during the trial, as she engaged deeply with legal matters to better understand the proceedings. Thus, choosing law as a profession felt natural and obvious to her. While pursuing her studies, Louise decided to fulfill another dream, learning to dance. She took salsa lessons and later opened her own dance school, becoming a dance instructor. Her classes included children, often accompanied by their mothers, who were comfortable with her past and aware of the accusations against her. In 2002, Louise graduated with honors from university and began working as a lawyer. However, a year later, she left her law firm to return to her dance studio. She then married businessman Anthony Elkis, who worked in cargo transportation, and they had a daughter. By 2014, Louise had authored several books and participated in numerous interviews about past incident. In all interviews, she has insisted that she was wrongly accused of Matthew's death. She insisted she had no intention to harm and believed her arrest was unjust. She remarked that the U.S. judicial system often demands accountability, suggesting that if the parents weren't blamed, the suspicion fell on her. Still, she expressed relief and gratitude that the judicial system ultimately resolved the case, leading to her release. Louise, now 45 years old, continues to live a normal life without feeling guilty about the past, and many people support her in this. In one of her interviews, she stated that she had the right to enjoy her life. Meanwhile, the parents of Matthew, Deborah, and Sunil faced public outrage. People criticized them for prioritizing their careers over spending time with their children, questioning why they hired an inexperienced young nanny who was not equipped to care for small children. Despite knowing this, they were attracted because the cost of hiring her would be very low and burdened her with excessive responsibilities. The 18-year-old nanny, Louise, received only 3 days of training before being overwhelmed with numerous restrictions and rules. Due to public pressure, the Eapen family had to relocate to a new, undisclosed address. It is known that they now have 2 more children and no longer hire nannies, with Deborah taking on the responsibility of raising the children herself. They established the Matthew Eapen Foundation at Boston Children's Hospital to enhance child safety and well-being by educating the public about the dangers of shaking a baby and providing support to victims and their families. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Neville and June Bamber. June and Neville became the owners of White House Farm. A Royal Air Force veteran, after many years of service, he transitioned to a position as the master of a small local court. In 1949, June married he at the age of 25, and that same year, they moved into their new farmhouse. Their dream is to have children and build a happy, close family. However, June could not get pregnant. After numerous attempts, they discovered that the issue was genetic, and they would not be able to have biological children. However, they did not lose hope and they were able to find a way to become parents. The Bamber family adopted 2 children from an orphanage. First, they adopted Sheila, who was just 3 months old, and a few years later, they adopted 6-month-old Jeremy. June and Neville cared for and educated their adopted children conscientiously, giving them all their love and tenderness. As Sheila and Jeremy grew up, they ensured they received a good education by sending them to prestigious private schools with high-quality standards. The Bambers' financial situation was very good, allowing them to take care of themselves and their children fully and comfortably. Like any family, June and Neville also faced problems in their relationship. Not having a biological relationship with your children can sometimes make the situation more complicated. However, for the most part, their family life proceeded smoothly, without any major conflicts. In 1985, Sheila was 28, Jeremy was 24, and their adoptive parents, June and Neville, had just turned 60. That summer was so peaceful, with everyone enjoying the sun and nature, until the early hours of August 7th. At 3:30 a.m., Jeremy was awakened by an unexpected phone call. When he answered, he was shocked when he heard his father, Neville, on the other line. Neville's voice was frantic and distressed. He struggled to explain that Sheila had gone crazy and have weapons. While Jeremy still didn't fully understand what was going on, the call suddenly lost connection. Alarmed, Jeremy immediately contacted the police, relaying what Neville had said. He also warned them that Sheila could be dangerous. Despite the urgency, it took the police an hour and a half to arrive at the scene. By then, it was still dark, and the house was shrouded in shadows. The area was eerily quiet, a stark contrast to the chaos Neville had described. Since firearms were reportedly involved, the police approached cautiously, adhering to standard procedures. Then, they decided not to enter the house. Instead, they waited outside, wait for the task force to come and handle it. The police positioned themselves at a safe distance from the house and used a megaphone to try to communicate with anyone inside. For more than 2 hours, police tried to contact Bamber's family, but received no response. During this time, the police asked Jeremy to explain what had happened at the Bamber household the previous day. He explained that the entire family had gathered for dinner the night before. Toward the end of the evening, there had been a minor misunderstanding, but not serious. He also mentioned that he had left a pistol and a .22 caliber carbine with his parents. Both guns were in good working order and loaded. Nearly 3 hours after the first police officers arrived, at approximately 8 a.m., the special forces entered the house. Inside, the atmosphere was heavy and somber. The team cautiously advanced, inspecting the first floor. When they entered the kitchen, they found a scene of chaos. A chair facing down on the ground, and next to it, in a pool of blood, was Neville's lifeless body. He had been shot 8 times, 6 of which hit the head, leaving him with little chance of survival. His hands and face were bruised and scraped, with a broken nose and jaw, shows that he fought back drastic against the attacker. The officers completed their search of the first floor, then, they moving upstairs. Each step had to be made with caution to avoid noise, but this is very difficult. Because the floor is old and makes a creaking sound every time it is moved. On the second floor, in 2 bedrooms, they discovered 4 more bodies. They found June, Sheila, and 2 6-year-old boys, Daniel and Nicholas, all of whom had been fatally shot. June had been struck by 7 bullets, while Daniel and Nicholas sustained 5 and 3 shots, respectively. Sheila was found on the threshold of her parents' bedroom, with 2 gunshot wounds under her chin. In total, 25 bullets were used to kill the 5 members of Bamber family. Initially, police theorized that the Bamber family members had been deliberately killed. But who could have committed such an act? Was the perpetrator an acquaintance of the family, who had long planned to harm them and then finally carried it out? Or was the criminal so clever that he tried to fool the police with a fake clue? These questions remained unanswered, prompting the authorities to immediately begin an investigation. It is remarkable that although Sheila and Jeremy were both very well educated, they grew up with completely different personalities. Jeremy was introverted from a young age, preferred solitude, and did poorly in elementary school. Sheila, on the other hand, always had many friends around her. Jeremy is hot-tempered and has difficulty controlling his emotions. Even though his parents tried to educate him, but he still did not change. Eventually, they decided to send him to boarding school, which happened in 1970, when he was 9 years old. Boarding schools in England at that time were famous for their strict and harsh discipline, applied to all ages of students. Attending such institutions was expensive, but this was not an issue for the Bambers. As soon as Jeremy entered the boarding school, he realized he could no longer behave as he had before, as any disobedience was met with punishment. Unfortunately, he made the mistake of telling his classmates that he had come from an orphanage. His friends used that information to bully him. They often taunted him about being adopted, calling him a bastard. His years at boarding school were a challenging period for him. Although they didn't teach him many good things, they did help him improve his character somewhat. Over time, Jeremy became calmer, went on to university, and successfully graduated. Neville was extremely proud of his son and even bought him a ticket to Australia. For the next 4 years, he traveled extensively across the country, spent time living in New Zealand, and eventually returned to England in 1982. Upon his return, his parents, Neville and June, asked him to work on their farm. Along with the job, they provided him with a place to live, a cottage 6 kilometers from the farm, along with a car and a monthly salary of nearly $1,000, a generous amount for the time. They wanted to ensure that he had a comfortable life and did everything they could to support him. Additionally, they hoped he would help them when they were old. June, a very religious woman, had a hard time accepting the fact that her children had different views and attitudes about religion. Throughout her life, she did everything she to guide them toward what she believed was the true path and to bring them closer to God. Unfortunately, her efforts were unsuccessful. So, she had suffered from severe depression, and her mental health had greatly deteriorated. At the time, mental health issues were treated with a crude and outdated method, administering electric shocks to the patient. It was believed that this could positively influence brain function. June's depression wasn't caused solely by her son, Jeremy. Her daughter Sheila, despite her calmer demeanor, also caused her great distress. Sheila enjoyed looking at magazines featuring models in provocative poses. Sheila dreamed of becoming a model and appearing on the cover of such magazines. However, she does not support this. But Sheila's problems don't stop there. One day, Sheila announced to her parents that she was pregnant. In many families, the news might have been met with joy, but the Bamber family is not like that. Sheila was still a teenager and unmarried, which made the situation complicated. June, her adoptive mother, faced a difficult decision. Should she pressure Sheila to have an abortion? As a Christian, June could not condone abortion, but at the same time, allowing the child to be born is unacceptable. Then, June told Sheila to make her own choice, but on the condition that if she had an abortion, no one in the family would know. This makes the relationship between June and Sheila more and more tense. In 1977, despite her parents' objections, Sheila is married to Colin Caffell. They on to have twin sons, Nicholas and Daniel. Initially, their family life seemed happy, but Sheila began to suspect Colin of infidelity. Her suspicions were correct, and she eventually filed for divorce. In 1982, they are officially divorced, which had a devastating impact on Sheila's mental health. She couldn't bear the shock from the divorce, so she fell into depression, and she was eventually admitted to a mental hospital for treatment. Nicholas and Daniel were sent to an orphanage, where they stayed for nearly 2 years. During this time, Sheila's mental health deteriorated further. She became increasingly anxious, frequently spoke about ending her own life and that of her children, whom she believed were possessed by the devil. She was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. Meanwhile, Sheila and Jeremy seemed to swap positions with each other. Jeremy, who was a rebel for years, now lives a peaceful and stable life. In 1985, Sheila reconciled with her ex-husband, Colin. Together, they removed Nicholas and Daniel from the orphanage and start a new life together. In August, Neville and June invited Sheila and her family to visit, so they could reunite with their grandchildren, Daniel von Nicholas. They hadn't seen their 2 nephews in a long time. They decided that the family would spend a week together, after which Colin would take the boys on a trip to Norway. On Tuesday, August 6, 1985, Colin brought the boys to the family farm. And everyone gathered at the Bamber house. The day was filled with joy. There was a family dinner, a happy atmosphere, and delicious food. Later, Neville and June asked Sheila to take Daniel and Nicholas back to the orphanage, arguing that she couldn't provide them with a proper education. This suggestion angered Sheila. She replied that she would make the decision herself. The calm atmosphere of the evening was disrupted at 8:30 p.m. Around the same time, Jeremy left the house. Barbara Wilson, the secretary at Bamber Farm, called Neville regarding a work-related matter. When Neville answered, she realized he seemed very annoyed. In the background, she could hear raised voices, as though people were arguing or upset about something. This was unusual for the Bamber family, which surprised she. However, she couldn't learn more about the situation because Neville quickly ended the call and hung up. The next morning, everyone present in Bamber's house was shot dead. Jeremy, the only survivor, was informed of the tragedy. Overcome with grief, he couldn't hold back his tears. Investigators treated him with respect, allowing him time to gather himself before beginning their questioning. Jeremy shared everything he knew, including the hardships Sheila went through, and the argument that had occurred at the dinner table on the evening of August 6th, shortly before he decided to leave the house. At first glance, the crime that Sheila committed seemed to be an act of desperation and impulsivity, because at the time, she was suffering from mental illness. After hearing Neville and June's suggestion that she should return her 2 sons to the orphanage, she felt the interference in her private life was unacceptable. When she lost control, she grabbed a weapon and shot Neville, June, Daniel, Nicholas, and finally shoot yourself. Investigators believe this is what happened. However, there is one very strange detail: Sheila had been shot twice in different parts of her body. How could she have managed to do this to herself? The actions of the detectives were puzzling. They decided to burn the blood-soaked bedsheets carpet where the bodies were found. They explained that they wanted to help Jeremy avoid the painful memories of the incident. Furthermore, the weapon discovered at the crime scene, which was a key piece of evidence, was improperly handled by the investigator. They picked it up with their bare hands without wearing gloves. A few days later, Bamber's family funeral was held, and Jeremy attended. He seemed distraught over the tragedy, weeping over the coffins of his sister, parents, and nephews. However, on that day, the investigation was reopened. Relatives of Bamber's family have expressed concerns about Jeremy's unusual behavior. Despite his tears, he made odd remarks, such as referring to himself as the boss. They found him smiling with the look of someone satisfied with victory. They reported this to police, causing police to conduct a more thorough investigation. Crime scenes need to be investigated carefully and meticulously to avoid drawing hasty conclusions. The detectives began by examining the weapon. They discovered fingerprints from several individuals, including the investigator who had handled the gun without gloves. The appearance of Sheila and Jeremy's fingerprints is not surprising. Jeremy admitted the gun was his, explaining he had purchased it for hunting. It is also understandable that Sheila's fingerprints were on the gun, as the initial theory suggested she had used the gun as the murder weapon. A few days later, Jeremy's cousin secretly went to the Bamber family home to search the house. He convinced that Sheila was not involved in the murder. By this point, Jeremy had inherited to his family home and was living there alone. During the search, the cousin inspected every room and the closet, and he found a silencer for a .22 caliber carbine. Length of the gun, combined with the silencer, made it impossible for the attacker to have turned the weapon on themselves and fired. This discovery strongly suggested that Sheila could not have been the perpetrator. If Sheila had fired the gun without the silencer, a new question arises: why were traces of blood found on the end of the silencer? Sheila, who had been shot twice and was bleeding, could not have removed the silencer and hidden it deep in the closet. This suggests that the silencer was attached to the rifle in the murders. From this point, everything started to become clear. Julie, Jeremy's girlfriend, suspects him of being involved in killing his family. She contacted investigators and shared some information. She revealed that on the night of August 7th, Jeremy had called her, saying there were problems. However, when she tried to ask what was wrong, he abruptly hung up. She also recalled that shortly before the murders, he had repeatedly complained about his family. Most importantly, she revealed that the Bamber family had drawn up a will, which stated that all assets would be passed on to their children after their deaths. This made Jeremy very angry. He did not want to share the inheritance with his sister, Sheila. In addition, Jeremy also told Julie that he wanted to kill his family and blame it on Sheila, a mentally ill person. She reported all of this to the police, not because she wanted to help the investigation, but because she was feeling angry, so she had just learned that Jeremy had a new girlfriend. However, there is no direct evidence to prove Jeremy's guilt. He tried to mislead the investigation. He gave the police the name of a suspect, a plumber he to have hired. However, when investigators questioned the plumber, they learned that he was completely innocent. He also has a solid alibi, helped to remove any suspicion against him. As a result, Jeremy Bamber became the primary suspect. He was taken into custody due to his inability to provide an alibi. However, the police released him after failing to find evidence linking him to the massacre. Surprisingly, he was allowed to leave the country. After inheriting the property, Jeremy's financial situation improved a lot. He sold Neville's car and to Saint-Tropez, France. Upon returning to England on September 29th, he was arrested and charged with the murder of the Bamber family. The trial began on October 3rd. One of the main points raised in court was about Neville's injuries. His body showed multiple bruises, suggesting that he had tried to defend himself from an attack. The medical examiner speculated that the injuries were caused by the same .22 caliber carbine. Sheila, a petite and frail woman, it seemed unlikely that she could have inflicted such severe injuries on her father. In contrast, Jeremy appeared capable of doing so. Neville's body showed signs of a struggle, with multiple bruises. Sheila also received several blows, but there were no signs of a struggle on her body, and her nails remained intact. The defense countered these arguments, that believed that Sheila suffered from mental illness, which made her the prime suspect, capable of committing a five-fold murder. They emphasized that she grew up on a farm, was skilled at handling guns, and was an experienced target shooter. Additionally, Jeremy's lawyers highlighted that Sheila's blood was fresher than the rest of the family's, so they claiming that she ended her life after killing others. This, they argued, could have been due to guilt or the sound of approaching police cars. However, the prosecution disputed these claims. If Sheila had been the killer and then end her life, then the policeman on duty near the house, they will hear the last gunshot. However, no sound was detected. Furthermore, Sheila could not have pulled the trigger with the silencer attached, as it would have been out of her reach. The silencer was also found in a closet, rather than on the carbine where it logically should have been. The defense is in a difficult position because it has no arguments to refute the prosecution. According to the prosecution's argument, the motive for the murder stemmed from Jeremy's anger when he learned the contents of the will. In the will, the inheritance was divided equally between him and Sheila. His greed for the inheritance led him to plan a massacre. On August 6th, between 10:30 p.m. and 11 p.m., Jeremy left his relative's house and went home. Later that night, he returned to their house on a bicycle he had taken from his mother, June, a few days earlier. He took a roundabout route and entered the house through an open bathroom window on the first floor. He climbed inside, retrieved the loaded gun, and went to June's bedroom. Then, he shot and killed her with 2 shots. Next, he aimed the gun at Neville, but Neville woke up and tried to defend himself, leading to a fight. During the struggle, he managed to shoot Neville. After killing Neville, Jeremy returned to the bedroom and killed Sheila and her 2 children, Daniel von Nicholas. He then staged the scene to make it look like Sheila was the perpetrator, he placing the carbine in her hands. With his crime complete, he left the house on his bike. He called his girlfriend, Julie, almost revealing what he had done, and then called the police to report that Neville had allegedly called him. However, if Neville was threatened with a weapon, he would contact the police, not Jeremy. Jeremy's actions seemed to make everyone feel strange. Why didn't he come to the crime scene immediately after Neville's call? After considering the evidence and various assumptions, the jury deliberated for 9 hours and reaching a verdict. Ultimately, Jeremy Bamber was convicted of 5 murders and sentenced to 5 life terms in prison with no chance of parole. Jeremy, meanwhile, maintains his innocence.